Hello, hello, hello. How are we all doing? Hope we're doing well. Hope we're doing good. Hope we're doing not too bad. Hope we're doing okay. Hope we're doing fine. We have so much to talk about. It has been a day. It's been a day in UK politics. I mean, it just seems like there's no day. We don't ever get a break from UK politics. We really don't. Things just continually getting even more ridiculous every single time we tune in, which is great. Ah, fuck it. Extra content for me. I'm not going to complain about being given free content. All good, especially stuff that comes up number 10 because there's no copyright. It's all good. We're all good. Howdy, 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 howdy. Let me get the press conference up. Can we watch that in a sec? So I was just minding my own business at work. I just casually checked my phone and I found out that Kwasi Kwarteng's been sacked. After the disaster of the mini budget and the markets collapsing and bond yields dramatically increasing, the pound falling, turns out it wasn't Liz Truss's idea, apparently. It was Kwasi Kwarteng's idea, and she has now ditched him to save herself, along with Chris Philp, Chief Secretary of the Treasury. He's gone too. It's an absolute massacre down at Tory HQ. He's been replaced by Jeremy Hunt, which is a pretty bold departure from the Tufton Street budget that she and Kwasi had tried to implement 3 weeks ago. It's been an absolute riot in politics today. All this speculation going on. There's been loads of reaction. There's been a press conference. So we're going to watch the press conference first. Then we're going to go and analyze the reaction to this. We'll see how it is. Let's go.
Good afternoon. My conviction that this country needs to go for growth is rooted in my personal experience. I know what it's like to grow up somewhere that isn't feeling the benefits of growth. I saw what that meant, and I'm not prepared to accept that for our country. I want to
She's going to grow the pie. I don't know how much. I wonder if we have a counter the amount of times that she said the word growth over the past fucking 4 weeks, whatever. Like she can't stop saying it. I think she must have realized it's all over and it's just kind of in autopilot now, just like growth, grow pie growth over and over and over again, like realizing what she's even saying.
Country where people can get good jobs, new businesses can set up, and families can afford an even better life. That's why from day one, I've been ambitious for growth. Since the 2008 financial crisis, the potential of this great country has been held back by persistently weak growth.
Oh, I wonder who was in power for 12 of those 14 years. Don't you think that's a little weird? Don't you think that's strange? How the single party that's been in power for 90% of the time since that event, they've had really low growth. That's really strange. And it's also strange how growth was bigger in the 2 years following the financial crisis when a different political party was in power. Isn't that strange? Isn't that a bit weird?
I want to deliver a low-tax, high-wage, high-growth economy.
But you can't do that with the level of public services, right? I mean, I've not watched PMQs, but I've seen some of the responses where she essentially said that that she had no plans on cutting public spending. Well, she's got no choice. She has no choice. She either keeps high taxes, right? Or she cuts public spending, or there's like continual market turmoil. Like, I'm sorry, that's just gonna happen. It's not like there's some kind of magical compromise position. You have to choose.
It's what I was elected by my party to do.
Oh, by your party, not by the general public, though, were you?
That mission remains. People across this country rightly want stability. That's why we acted to support businesses and households with their energy costs this winter. It's also the case that global economic conditions are worsening due to the continuation of Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. And on top of this, debt was amassed helping people through the COVID pandemic. But it is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are
Or that they were just completely economically illiterate. Maybe that's a problem.
delivering our mission right now has to change. We need to act now to reassure the markets of our fiscal discipline. I have therefore
Well, reassure them by having literally any fiscal discipline.
decided to keep the increase in corporation tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year. It will act as a
What's interesting as well is this is technically a U-turn on a U-turn in the Conservative 2019 manifesto, which apparently is just completely pointless now. Apparently, like, the 2019 manifesto just completely gone out the window in every single possible respect. And it was in the 2019 manifesto where they're talking about how great it was that they had low corporation tax. So the one thing that Rishi Sunak was planning to do, which was against the wishes of the mandate that they had at the election based off what was in the manifesto, is the thing that she's now also U-turning on. It's a real comedy of errors, but I mean, it's definitely the correct thing to do, to be able to generate the revenue through raising corporation tax based. I mean, good. Let's raise corporation tax. Fine. It's a good thing, but it's not what's in the manifesto that seems to be on everyone's lips right now, considering how much divergence there has been off very little democratic mandate.
down payment on our full medium-term fiscal plan, which will be accompanied by a forecast from the independent OBR. We will do whatever is necessary to ensure debt is falling as a share of the economy in the medium term. We will control the size of the state to ensure that taxpayers' money is always well spent. Our public sector will become more efficient to deliver world-class services for the British people.
Also, it's just frustrating just listening to people who hate the state in general talk about it, where there's this implicit assumption that the only way that you can get a better out of the state is by cutting the things that you think don't need to be there, which inevitably involves cutting more than is necessary, because you feel like you just want to reduce budgets for the sake of it. Rather, no, how about we keep the budgets as they are, and then any efficiency savings can be made on improving the services overall in general. I mean, look at the NHS, where it's continually had a drop in funding as a percentage of GDP for the past decade, and yet, you know, people are like, oh, we need to cut the quangos and get rid of the diversity offices or whatever it is. You know, it just needs actual funding based upon the size of the country as it is, and considering the scale of what extra we need to be able to keep it afloat, given our aging population, which it's not being given right now.
And spending will grow less rapidly.
Well, actually, the thing that's boy meets Minnie is that in her little bloody mini manifesto that they did, Britannia Unchained, back in 2013, they explicitly said that they liked the Singapore healthcare system. David Davis MP has said the NHS is unfixable and that it needs to turn into a private healthcare model, which is amusing considering that he gets £30,000 a year of lobbying money from a private equity firm that has investments in private healthcare. Weird, isn't it?
Than previously planned. I met the former Chancellor earlier today. I was incredibly sorry to lose him.
You weren't. You were just like, oh, great, I have yet another fall guy for all of my mistakes that I can blame so that I can try and remain in power, despite the fact that you're polling. There's another poll that's increased the Labour lead to 34 points. 53% placed 19%. Like, if she is genuine about her desire to destroy the Conservative Party, then she's definitely taken all of the right moves.
He is a great friend, and he shares my vision to set this country on the path to growth. Today, I have asked Jeremy Hunt to become the new Chancellor. He's one of the most experienced and widely respected government ministers and parliamentarians.
I mean, this is a bit of a double-edged sword in that Jeremy Hunt is at least not, like, fundamentally moronic in the same way that Kwasi Kwarteng is and or was by implementing the silly libertarian policies of the IEA and all of the Heritage Foundation money that Liz Truss has clearly gotten to get to this position that she's in right now. But he's also the guy who had the war with the juniors at doctors, who wrote a book about how to privatize the NHS. There's another one there, right? And yeah, like the state of the NHS is almost partly down to his premiership as health secretary. So it's usually replaced one shade of shit with a different shade of shit. Although clearly the rightoids are absolutely crazy about this shit, as they are mad about Jeremy Hunt, not because of the things he did to the NHS, right? None of that stuff. But they're actually mad because of his policies. He is admiring the Chinese Communist Party's lockdown policy, which, to be fair, I think was pretty draconian. But there were definitely some elements of their desire of eradication strategy that we should have taken at least early, right? Like, we're on an island. When you look at someone like, for example, New Zealand, who did do pretty strict lockdown policies and also border control, right? That's another point that Jeremy Hunt made about lockdown policies, and the border control when you have an island during a pandemic is super important, and we could have done without major risk to the people actually in the country to try and control the spread right in the early days when we knew, right? When people in northern Italy were having to share houses with the corpses of their loved ones because of how little prepared Italy was to deal with the pandemic. We could have taken those precautions right then, and Jeremy Hunt is right and correct in his assumption there. But also, it seems weird for them to critique them saying the Conservative Party is being taken over. Where the CCP takeover of Western governments proceeds apace with the list. Then they literally voted for Liz Truss as leader, who was a person who, whilst during the election campaign, was revealed who was incredibly impressed with the work ethic of the Chinese people, which is down to the Deng reforms of the Chinese Communist Party. Their market reforms that actually made workers' lives worse, took away a load of their workers' rights, stripped away all but one trade union which was affiliated to the CCP already. But now, it's only now, right? It's only now that Jeremy Hunt says, well, maybe as we're an island, maybe we should have pursued a zero COVID strategy. That's only now that they're getting frustrated with the links to any kind of admiration of Chinese policy, which is very strange, very, very strange. It's like, yeah, neoliberal party doing neoliberalism things neoliberally, and they're like, is this communism? Very, very strange, but let's continue.
And he shares my convictions and ambitions for our country. He will deliver the medium-term fiscal plan at the end.
But also in general, that just pisses off the whole of the Conservative base. It's a massive U-turn of what they really wanted, which was this disaster budget. Let's not forget, the Conservative membership, they wanted this. It's their entire reason that we're in this predicament that we are in right now is because they were sold a moon on a stick, quote unquote, by Liz Truss during the election campaign to become Conservative leader, where she promised all of the amazing stuff like, we can have all of these low taxes, or look how amazing the country will be when I just destroy the state with my libertarian principles and my whatever, despite the fact that no one in the country voted for it. They're like, oh, we love that, low taxes, and then realize, oh, hang on a minute, this crashes the economy, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, it does crash the economy. Whoops, well, you got what you wanted. And now she's immediately turned around on that. You turned on everything, increasing corporation tax, which is what they didn't want, putting, someone who's quote unquote part of the left wing of the Conservative Party, if you could call it such a thing, as Chancellor, massively completely diverging from the kind of path that she was on with Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor. But she's already pissed off the moderates within the Conservative Party anyway with what she's done to this point already, and by not just going, considering how hated she is by the public, and the fact that come next election, all of her, like, a huge chunk of the Conservative Party all going to be out of a job, apart from the, the highly paid roles they have at private equity firms, or as landlords, which is 26% of them actually are statistically. So it seems like that she's trying to take the path to make as many people angry as possible, which, to be honest, I'm finding very funny.
End of this month. He will see through the support we are providing to help families and businesses, including our energy price guarantee that's protecting people from higher energy bills this winter. And he will drive our mission to go for growth, including taking forward the supply-side reforms that our country needs. We owe it to the next generation to improve our economic performance.
I mean, she's done by Christmas, right? I mean, at this point, she said there wasn't going to be a U-turn. There's been a U-turn. She said that Kwasi Kwarteng wasn't going to get sacked, and now he's been sacked. She said that she has no intention of resigning as Prime Minister, which means 100% she's gone by Christmas, possibly even Halloween. It's been said that there's going to be a plot to replace her by Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt. At some point in the future, and there are already enough letters to trigger a leadership election or a no confidence vote have already been submitted to the 1922 committee, but Graham Brady is on holiday until Monday, so they can't process that just yet. They also need to change the rules so they can actually remove her, because Tory PMs are immune from a confidence vote until they've had a year in the position. They'd have to change the rules first. Graham Brady's going to get back to a massive stack of people angry, letters from angry people at the destruction of the Conservative Party from the inside. He's got to process all of that, and then they've got to be able to somehow change the rules to get rid of her, which they may or may not do at this point. So it's all really up in the air. But I'm 100% of the opinion that she'll just be gone. But the Conservative Party is ruthless. They're an election-winning juggernaut. If they don't think that Liz Truss can A, manage the economy, or B, see them through another election cycle, they'll get rid of her. They'll get rid of her instantaneously, which they should. For the good of the country at this point, The alternative is so milquetoast and lukewarm in comparison with Sir Keith Starmer KC, right? That I do not really care about. I don't have any joy at the understanding that he'll be Prime Minister. Nothing motivates me about the idea of a Keir Starmer premiership, right? But the mortgage issues and the issues with the pound and the issues that we have with bond yields and what's going to happen to our country economically, it has to stop. It has to stop. It has to be rectified immediately. And if her U-turn here doesn't fix it immediately, she has to go and someone competent has to replace her. I don't care who, right? Sure, no justice. Or are you betraying your leftist principles by hoping that there's some kind of decorum? Yeah, I don't want people losing their homes. I don't care how boomer or irritating these people are, and the fact that they've got a mortgage and a bunch of millennials don't. I get it. I get that it's awful, but these people are getting basically exactly what they wanted by voting Tory. But these people need to keep their homes. I'm sorry, that just has to happen. These people need to be protected, and they're not being protected at the moment. There just has to be a change. I don't care who it is. There just needs to be someone who's better than Liz Truss in power.
To deliver higher wages, new jobs, and better public services, and to ease the burden of debt. I have acted decisively today because my priority is ensuring our country's economic stability. As Prime Minister, I will always act in the national interest. This is always my first consideration. I want to be honest, this is difficult, but we will get through this storm, and we will deliver the strong and sustained growth that can transform the prosperity.
That's the growth number 8, I believe.
Of our country for generations to come. I'll now take questions.
So what's an U-turn of all the mini budget? Because they're still keeping the uplift on the threshold on national insurance, whilst also keeping the cut to national insurance as well, or the reversal of the raise in national insurance. So I don't think they've got it all covered, but at least you're slowly rowing back pieces of the budget. Just then they're going to keep rowing it back until it gets to the point at which the markets start calming down. I think that is clearly what they're trying to do here. I wonder how long it will take, but you can just see that it's somebody who's just lost. She just doesn't have a clue what the fuck she's doing.
Can I start with Ben Riley-Smith, Telegraph?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Clearly a difficult day. Can you explain to the public why you think you should remain as Prime Minister, given you've junked a key tax cut that led you to be elected?
Immediately goes to the Telegraph where's the journalists who agree with me, who put me into the position that I'm in, basically.
And got rid of your Chancellor.
I'm absolutely determined to see through what I have promised, to deliver a higher growth, more prosperous United Kingdom, to see us through the storm we face. We've already delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure people aren't facing huge bills this winter. But it was right, in the face of the issues that we had, that I acted decisively to ensure that we have economic stability, because that is vitally important.
I mean, now you did the complete opposite with the mini budget, or the fiscal event, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's just to make this, there's just no rhyme or reason to any of this. I mean, if you wanted to ensure economic stability, the energy price guarantee was good. Like, I'm not saying, I say good, I mean, it was acceptable. It was necessary and was done against the wills of the quote unquote free market, rather than, but there should have been a windfall tax, but whatever. At least the energy price guarantee happened, and more people than were going to are now going to be able to heat their homes through the winter period. Like, sure. But you didn't need to do the ridiculous rest of the fiscal event. It didn't need to happen. You're not. There's even more weak and wobbly than Theresa May.
Important to people and businesses right across our country. Harry Cole.
It was like someone choosing what to order at a kebab shop. Like,
thank you, Prime Minister Harry Cole from The Sun. You were the one that wanted to cut the 45p rate. You stood on a platform to win the leadership of the Conservative Party on a platform to cut corporation tax. You and the Chancellor, the ex-Chancellor, designed this budget together, in lockstep, we're told, at times in secret, the two of you. He has to go because of the fallout from it. How come you get to stay?
Well, my priority is making sure we deliver the economic stability that our country needs. That's why I had to take the difficult decisions I've taken today. The mission...
Well, the issue is that she has, I mean, she's kind of put herself into like this huge kind of catch-22, right? Where if she keeps everything as is with regards to the fiscal event and the actual cabinet, the poll ratings will stay low. The financial markets will continue getting worse, and they might even just get destroyed for good. If she U-turns on all of it and replaces Kwasi Kwarteng, which she has done, then she pisses off the membership, she pisses off the people who put her into the position that she's in, and her position becomes completely untenable because all of the kind of platform that she ran on to be leader, none of that matters anymore because she just rode it all back and become, continuity, mainstream conservatism, which is not what the membership wanted. They wanted something radical, something different. But she also, she appeases the MPs. But the MPs don't want her gone anyway, so why would she do that? But then if she keeps Kwasi Kwarteng but then continues rolling back bits of the mini budget, then it's just a completely humiliating climb down, and she just has no ability to be able to govern correctly. Like she there's no good, as far as if you're Liz Truss and you want to preserve your premiership, you want to preserve the fate of the Conservative Party, there's nothing that you can do apart from go. She has to go. There's nothing else that can happen, right? If you're a Conservative Party platform, the only thing you can do is get her to go, replace her with somebody competent, and hope that over the next 2 and a bit years, things look up slightly and the poll numbers get a little bit better. Maybe there'll be boots on the ground in Ukraine, and the UK can use that Falkland style to try and resurrect the Conservative Party from a poll deficit, just like they had in the 1980s. Maybe that's the thing that they can do. Maybe that's the only kind of path that they have to retain power. But Liz Truss, she ain't going to be part of that. I'm sorry.
Remains the same. We do need to raise our country's economic growth levels. We do need to deliver for
Number 9.
People across the country. We're committed to delivering on the energy price guarantee, which people are already seeing in their bills. But ultimately, we also need to make sure that we have economic stability, and I have to act in the national interest as Prime Minister. Chris May.
It's a lost little lamb. I almost feel sorry for her if I didn't absolutely despise everything that she stands for.
BBC.
Excuse the bluntness, Prime Minister, but given everything that has happened, what...
Oh yeah, absolutely peak accelerationist, right? I hope she stays. I hope she continues destroying things at this point, as far as, the credibility of the Conservatives, right? As long as things get fixed with the mortgage issue, and people stop leasing their homes, as far as I'm concerned, the best position for as far as I think a lefty is concerned is that Liz Truss stays in power, but the entirety of the mini budget gets reversed. Which I don't think is going to happen, but it's clear that as they learn further about what's being done, as far as the mini budget is concerned, that the actual policy prescriptions are not tenable either. But then again, if you roll back all the policy prescriptions, you roll back everything that Liz Truss stands for, and she can't continue anymore. But if she rolls it all back and continues and stays with Jeremy Hunt, then like that is the best position as far as we're concerned, because her image is irreparable at this point. And by keeping Jeremy Hunt, she pisses off all of the people who are like libertarian types as well. So, but the mini budget has to get reversed. Like that has to get reversed. I mean, but again, as far as I'm concerned, reversing the mini budget almost certainly has to entail the removal of Liz Truss as well. As I said previously, she has to go. Like. But if she did stay around after reversing it, that would be the best position possible.
Credibility do you have to continue governing?
What I've done today is made sure that we have economic stability in this country. Jeremy Hunt, as Chancellor, is somebody who shares my desire for a high-growth, low-tax
Number 10.
economy. But we recognise, because of current market issues, we have to deliver the mission in a different way. And that's what we are absolutely committed to do, achieving that stability at what is a very difficult time globally.
Like, she's just not answering the questions. Like, she's just saying, I have economic stability and also growth, also Jeremy Hunt, let's protect medium term. And that's it. When no accountability for what's happened as a response to the fiscal event and how essentially her leadership is untenable, given that she stood on a platform that she's now rowing back. What's the point? What's the point of having her there anymore?
Robert Peston.
Prime Minister, the former Tory Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has just said that you have...
Oh, you're absolutely right, Virgil. Like, the longer she stays, Labour will get an even bigger majority. Like, I mean, at the moment, like, the biggest poll lead I've seen is 34%. I think it'll go higher. I think more Lib Dems will just transfer over. More Lib Dems will just be like, well, I mean, to be fair, we'll probably get loads of tactical voting as well, but like understanding of tactical voting is now going to go out the window. Like, there are places like, for example, the Southwest in like the Blue Wall where Labour is polling 20 points ahead of the Tories in some points, right? So all of the previous places where you'd vote Liberal Democrat as a tactical vote to get the Tories out, that's all gone now. Keir Starmer is now the Tory. Keir Starmer is now the safe pair of hands for the economy that people seem to think that he is. So the Mr. Things will not fundamentally change, but we'll have a publicly owned company that gives subsidy to the private sector to make green energy. Like, sure, whatever. Like, that's the quote unquote, fiscally responsible person is Keir Starmer. So you can't just vote tactically against him anymore. Like, I think Liberal Democrats will realise this, or people who previously voted Lib Dem, and they'll all move over to Labour, and the lead will continue to grow. Like, Lib Dem's polling numbers have dropped, and they still really haven't repaired the fact that we're in this position. We are in this position because of the Lib Dems, right? The Lib Dems helped David Cameron into power in 2010. The Lib Dems are the people who enabled austerity. The Liberal Democrats are the ones who rubber-stamped neoliberal ideology for a decade to come by giving tacit support to it in 2010. Health and Social Care Act. All that kind of stuff. All the NHS reforms that came from Jeremy Hunt in the first Cameron administration as part of the coalition government. The Lib Dems caused this. They have no credibility. Like, so yeah, I think people will move across and Labour will get even more votes, and I think they might even reach 60%. The longer that, if Liz Truss continues being the leader, I think Labour will reach 60%. It's gonna be I don't think there'll be an early general election either, because the Tory MPs do not want to lose their jobs. They would sooner rather destroy the Conservative Party momentarily and try and rebuild it with a new leader than they would calling a general election now. Unless, of course, Liz Truss sees the writing on the wall and calls one herself out of spite, which would be, like, that would be the real banter timeline season finale. But I don't think that's going to happen. We're talking Tony Blair win number of jobs. I think bigger than Tony Blair. I think the Tories will be on double-digit seats if we continue down the road we're going down. If they don't remove Liz Truss, they're going to be on less than 100 seats. It's going to be an absolute massacre, a wipeout. I mean, people like Richard Tice was calling for a general election, was calling for the end of the Conservative Party, and that we're witnessing the destruction internally of a political. I've talked before on the stream. There could even be a split. There could be a Conservative Party split. We could have the Boris Johnson party trying to return to government. Boris Johnson could join Reform UK. I have no idea what's going to happen. We're living in turbulent political times. So much could happen. And if there is a party split, there will almost certainly be like a Labour Party. Almost dictatorial levels of single party governance. I mean, like, I've made peace with the fact that change is never happening, the world's never getting better. The best we can hope for is continuity neoliberalism from Keir Starmer. But as I've made peace with that, that means that I'm going to at least be able to enjoy the Conservative MPs eating out of bins. Like, that's I'm watching all the Conservative Party members get seethe and cope. Like, spite arc. We're continuing the spite-based politics arc. That's all I care about. I just want Tories to be absolutely miserable. Like the idea of Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, giving his track record as Labour Party leader, that's not something that is particularly palatable. But I've made peace. I'm just going to enjoy the Tories being miserable at this point. That's all I'm going to concentrate on.
Totally trashed the Tory party's election-winning reputation for economic competence. Will you apologise to your party?
I think the thing is, the issue is, right, I've got a whole segment about this on my YouTube channel, which you can go watch. It's the myth of Tory economic competence. The fact that Robert Peston comes up to her and says, it's only now that we've trashed the Tory record on economic competence, despite the fact that it was the ERG that pushed the removal from the single market, which massively affected the UK economy. It's the Conservative policies of austerity that stymied growth, that destroyed that took funding away from being able to get extra infrastructure investments, whilst borrowing costs were at an all-time low. In the wake of the global financial crisis, we could have done fiscal expansion to be able to invest in infrastructure, to be able to get extra productivity, which has been stagnant for 10 years. We've had no wage growth, we've had very little economic growth, and any economic growth gains that have done have only gone to the bourgeois at the expense of the rest of society, who've had to deal with crippling austerity cuts. 330,000 people lost their lives because of austerity cuts, studies have shown. At the time when we could have been borrowing to try and be able to engage in fiscal expansion to rebuild our economy post-global financial crisis. That's what Kevin Rudd did in Australia. They had the best results out of the GFC, right? And then during the neoliberal reforms under Margaret Thatcher, she only really survived because there was enough tax money coming in from the discovery of North Sea oil to be able to fund the dole program to deal with the huge amounts of unemployment and the stripping away of state programs under her watch. Like, there's no credibility economically for the Conservative Party, at least not since, not even Ted Heath, because there was the Barber boom and everything that happened. Like, you probably have to go back to Harold Macmillan to find the last Tory who could claim cared about fiscal responsibility and economic competence. And it's only the media, right? It's only the media's consistent buy-in to this ridiculous narrative that's allowed the Tories to continue in this position. But the only reason why David Cameron ever became Prime Minister in 2010, apart from obviously his enablement by the Liberal Democrats, but also was because of 10 years, a whole decade of newspaper whining about Muslims and brown people and benefit scroungers, like welfare recipients being given 2 nice TVs. All of that stuff, all that manufacturing consent was brought to bring down a pretty weak and neoliberal Labour government. Wasn't right-wing enough for the fucking Murdoch press at the time. And so it was only that huge amounts of, and you can see that as soon as the Conservatives get elected, all of the talk about immigration as a political issue, that all kind of dropped off the face of the earth, really, as far as the media is concerned. And the coverage dropped, so did people's apparent care about it, right? So the media have been complicit in this, and they were complicit in making sure that Liz Truss became the Tory party leader and became Prime Minister. Mail, Express, Telegraph, all backed Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak, despite the fact that Rishi Sunak was only the only person there who, at the two of them, who showed basic economic credentials, basic understanding of how economics worked. I mean, far be it from me to heap praise on somebody as awful as Rishi Sunak, who literally said that he wanted to take money away from poor people to put into wealthy Conservative seats. He's a monster who decided to try and trash trans people because he was afraid that if he didn't seem to be a culture warrior, he would lose the leadership election. And we even saw his poll ratings go up after he took that line, right? So he's just as bad on so many issues of this trust, but at least he was the one during the election said there would be a run on the pound, said that interest rates would skyrocket, said that but the bond markets would fall to pieces. He predicted all of this, right? And then both the media and the Conservative membership ignored him because they also don't believe. Really, I really don't think they actually believe in Tory economic competence. It's all just essentially an op. It's all just one massive consent manufacturing machine to be able to keep the Conservative Party in power, to protect their own bottom lines as media corporations, right? I've talked about manufacturing consent all of the time, and it only ever exists because these people, it's in their economic interest to do so, right? All they care about is ensuring that they deliver the maximum amount of profit to their shareholders, and they do that by ensuring that corporation tax is low, all that kind of stuff. And that's why Liz Truss got in. It's why George Osborne got in. Why Philip Hammond became Chancellor as well. Theresa May. All of this stuff. It's all complicit down. It's all down to the media's vice grip on the UK Overton window. Like, how did we get here? The media got here. The media got us here. Anything outside of the neoliberal bubble immediately got trashed as being fanciful or being communism. Like, do you all remember the broadband communism meme, right? From the Labour's pledge to give everybody free broadband at point of use, like a national broadband service, which makes sense because it's the demand is inelastic, right? It's very difficult to have competition, especially when things are divvied up between broadband providers, depending on which area you are. All of that got trashed in the media. It wasn't given even a proper look in. It's just, like, they're all complicit. The Tory members are complicit. The media's complicit. And again, I'm glad that the myth of Tory fiscal competence has been completely shattered at this point. Completely shattered. But even up till now, Robert Peston's like, well, it's only now that we see the economic competence, now that the markets are collapsing. It literally has to take up to this point where people are going to lose their houses. They're actually bothering to stick the knife in on this one.
Well, I am determined to deliver on what I set out when I campaigned to be party leader. We need to have a high growth economy, but we have to recognise that we are facing very difficult issues as a country. And it was right, in the national interest, that I made the decisions I've made today to restore that economic stability so we can deliver, first of all, helping people through this winter and next winter with their energy bills, but also making sure that our country is on the long-term footing for sustainable economic growth. Thank you very much, everybody.
Prime Minister, you going to say
Just like what? Just like it's the David Cameron style walkout. Do you remember, like, David Cameron would always just go thank you and then immediately just kind of run away? And she's just done that. Like, literally, like, that's what the journalists saying now. Just silence. Like the shaking of the head from Krishna Guru Murthy there. And she's got no answer. She has no answer. Like, we really are reaching the death knell at this point, to be honest. Which, based. But there's been some reaction. Nigel Farage, after at the start of as soon as the mini budget was released, he was like, "Ha, excellent, a proper conservative budget, low tax, let's go." Just shows how little he understands about economics. But anyway, and how much of not a friend of people he is. For someone who was being positioned as being a champion of normal people, right, a champion of the everyman, suddenly, just to support economic policy that only benefits the massively super rich. Oh, funny that, with the one who was standing in the golden elevator with Donald Trump. Anyway, let's listen to what he has to say about the fucking fiasco.
So the big U-turn is coming. Yes, she's going to raise corporation tax to 25% to make us completely uncompetitive, wholly unconservative. Kwasi Kwarteng will go. All he was doing was following her instructions. Oh, yeah. She now has no...
If your idea of conservatism is tax cuts regardless of economic damage, then you're an idiot. Like, even me, as a Marxist, can understand that there's a difference between fiscal conservatism in that you don't do big spending splurges, which you should do because deficits are fine as long as they're for infrastructure, but whatever. But you don't do big fiscal expansion, but you also make sure the market's happy and you keep the economy ticking, whatever. The quote unquote fiscal responsibility line, right? Like, that's technically a conservative platform. But if your platform relies on tax cutting at whatever the cost, no matter what happens to the economy or what happens to normal people, then I'm sorry, Nigel, you're just an idiot. You just don't know what you're talking about.
Validity, 12 years of Tory misrule. We need a realignment of British politics under a new electoral system. This lot have betrayed us, let us down completely and utterly. We're becoming the laughingstock of the world. So the big...
I mean, we've been the laughingstock of the world for quite a while now, Nigel. I don't know if you've missed that. I don't know if I mean, to be fair, you had a pretty big part to play in the being the laughingstock of the world, to be fair, especially considering his campaigning for things that were just not good for the country regardless. Anyway, especially on an economic platform, right? But it's clear that he's part of the reason why people are all laughing at us, because again, he supported the nonsense economic reforms that was pushed through in the fiscal event. Like, he's just as complicit in all of this as people like Truss are. For him to say there's been 12 years of mismanagement, like, you got what you wanted. You literally installed Boris Johnson in 2019 by making sure that you played spoiler against certain seats which were Tory strongholds, and only ran against Labour deliberately to split the vote to be able to put these people in power. What do you like, things Conservatives, or don't you? It's very clear that there was very incredibly divergent economic paths that both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss wanted to go down. In that Boris Johnson ran on a campaign of levelling up, ostensibly being able to, inject money into deprived areas, right? Actually engaging in some kind of government, like, interventionist fiscal policy. And now you're saying, well, actually, it's good that I installed him, right? I wanted to do that. But now someone who does the opposite, who does trying to do fiscal contraction, but not really, because they're borrowing huge amounts of money to be able to pay for the energy price guarantee, whilst also cutting taxes and trying to not cut public services, but also cut national insurance whilst not raising corporation tax, which is just a nonsensical platform. Like, oh, excellent, this is the excellent budget that I wanted. And now we're seeing the economic ruin after that. So what is it? What is it? Like, do you want these people to be in power or not? Do you like conservatism or not? Do you like fiscal responsibility? This is completely incoherent as far as Nigel Farage is concerned. Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute laugh riot, JDM. I really, really, absolutely loving this shit. Incredibly funny. But also look here at Darren Grimes. Like, I think we should all be worried and despondent about the fact that financial markets and the media can depose a prime minister as quickly as if they don't like the policies espoused by them. It's a shame that you weren't saying the same things, Darren, about Jeremy fucking Corbyn. There's the whole idea behind Jeremy Corbyn is, oh, there'll be a run on the pound. The whole economy will collapse if we have Jeremy Corbyn ruining our country with his pseudo-communism, as Anne Widdecombe put it, during the 2017 election, right? And then also with the media talk about the angle of his bow, or the kind of coat or the tie that he wears, or the fact that calling him a terrorist sympathizer. And he's like, this is exactly the reason why people poo-poo Jeremy Corbyn at that point. But even so, like, the media didn't even really depose Liz Truss. Liz Truss is being deposed by her own policies. People are seeing their own mortgage rates rise. They're seeing the fact that I'm paying extra £200 a month on my mortgage, and they know that it's a direct result of the policies that she was engaging in, right? Like, if you think financial markets shouldn't be the deciding factor on who's prime minister, great. Well, stop talking about the economy when it comes to who you vote for at a general election, because clearly you don't care. These people talk out of both sides of their mouth, like, constantly. It's ridiculous. But again, like, if she hadn't screwed up the financial markets, people wouldn't be losing their houses. It's very simple, Darren. People, again, rule 101 of British politics: do not fuck with people's mortgages. She's managed to literally piss off everybody. Young people are pissed off because they don't like the Tories anyway, but they also don't like cutting public services because they rely on them more because they're usually poorer. She's pissed off old people with mortgages by making their mortgage rates massively increase. She's pissed off, like, the rightoids by saying that she wants more immigration, right? She's pissed off all of the Reform UK type people, all the Brexity folk, because she's a Remainer to begin with, and she's appointed now a Remainer Chancellor in Jeremy Hunt, who's supposed to be too left for these people, who's all the lockdown, all the anti-lockdown, like, cranks, all of the cookers, all of those people are now frustrated because of Jeremy Hunt's being pro-lockdown. Like, there's nobody in the country that she's not pissed off apart from the tiny minority of, like, incredibly, like, one-track mind support the Tories, whatever. Or, like, people who aren't racist but are Tories, but do own their own homes, but have paid off their mortgage, who also like the lockdowns and also vote Tory. Like, that tiny minority of people, there's the only people that she's not pissed off at this point. It's so frustrating to realise that people on the right literally don't care about principles, and so hypocrisy doesn't matter to them. I mean, I don't care about hypocrisy. I care about utility, right? One of my main criticisms of the right is that everything is about new veiled threats about, or veiled references to people's hypocrisy, right? They won't ever answer about the utility of the things that they espouse. All they will do is they'll attack their opponents based on some kind of manufactured idea of apparent hypocrisy, rather than thinking, well, is the result of this policy bad or good? Like, if they're being hypocritical, like, fine, own it, whatever, I don't care. But at least acknowledge the utility or no. Or they don't even acknowledge the utility. They're like, we can't get rid of Liz Truss because it's Liz Truss and she was voted in by a very small minority of Tory members rather than the general electorate, against the wishes of the democratic mandate that was given to Boris Johnson based off his manifesto. And that's negative utility. And people losing their houses, that's negative utility. Simple. Like, but the fact that their worldview is so incoherent, I understand why you're pissed off with that shit. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. Therese Coffey's still good friends. I mean, still deputy PM at this point, at time of recording. So, but yeah, like, these people just, it's so crazy. The positions, the kind of the mental gymnastics these people will go through to justify. Again, it must only be, right? It must only be that they have the same kind of brain poison that Twitter liberals have, Twitter centrists have, where it's just red team versus blue team. There's no such thing as policy, there's no such thing as utility, there's no such thing as material reality. All it is just blue team good, red team bad, as far as these people are concerned. And so they dislike Liz Truss for what she's done to the party specifically, rather than what she's done to the country, what she's done to the markets, what she's done to the economy. They don't care about any of that. They only care about the blue team winning because they've implanted their flag inside the blue team's tent. Right? And so if the blue team loses, they get pissed off, and that's all they really care about. I'm sure that must be the case, and that these people don't have any actual principles. They just support the blue team in the same way that the Twitter centrists all support the red team. At time of recording, obviously, because it's Keith Starmer, right? When it was Jeremy Corbyn, they never supported the red team. But as soon as the sensible man, right, where their only politics is based on vibes and also disliking the Tories, like, and so they'll vote for the red team regardless, and they won't even listen to any discussion about the effectiveness of the policies platform that Keir Starmer espouses or the ideology that he espouses, right? It's the same brain rot, just in a different rosette. Are people looking here, like, saying the tax burden rises again, the Tory party proves itself ungovernable again, not content with blocking a tax cut, backbenchers have now forced a tax rise. Yes, you're borrowing hundreds of billions of pounds to pay for the energy price guarantee, and the markets didn't like it. You can't just cut taxes. It's simple. It's super simple. It's just like very, very simple. I mean, yes, it has been a disaster, Emily, and this is the person who really wanted Kemi Badenoch to be PM, who ran on a very similar platform. Like, what? These people just don't live in reality. But it's also looking at the Liberals, looking at the mess, like with Emily Maitlis here, like this unhinged political haze, and starting to seriously consider entryism as the underlying mechanic. Did rogue outsiders infiltrate Tory grassroots membership to wreak havoc, as if she can't see what she has been part of manufacturing this as part of the media class, right? The media class, again, as I said, are entirely to blame for this. They never, ever, up until this point, questioned the precept of neoliberal thought. And it's reached its natural conclusion, and things have fallen apart. I'm like, you did this. You got what you wanted, right? This is entirely what the media kept uncritically platforming people like Emily Carver and Matthew Lesh and all these people from the Institute of Economic Affairs or Policy Exchange or the Centre for Policy Studies, all these people, right? They kept platforming these people as if they're real experts, which they're not. Let's be real. Think tankers are not real experts. They are paid propagandists for the rich in this country, right? That's all they exist to do. And they've been platforms completely uncritically up until now. Like there was a let me try and find it. There was a moment in Cross Question on LBC the other night, where Adam Bienkov, I actually think is pretty good. Like, I'm not a massive fan of Byline Times, but Adam Bienkov as their Westminster correspondent is pretty good. Oh, let's not watch that. And he was he took a punt at Emily Carver about
I'm joined by Andrew
their
Marr in the
funding.
studio now, LBC presenter.
Let me refresh that.
Well,
He-
you know,
he
the,
was-
the agenda that Liz
It's the first time I've seen any media figure actually point at the Institute of Economic Affairs and say, who funds you? Why do you, what possible reason could you espouse the thing that you espouse based upon the organisation that you're in? And I think it's the first time anybody seen their own, the integrity of places, these think tanks, questioned out in the open. And it's taken 12 years. It's taken us 12 years of Tory government for this to happen. There's a really great video by Tom Nicholas about how think tanks and fake experts shape the news. Basically, like there was a story about how the Institute of Economic Affairs, I think, some kind of hypothesis that Ugandistic. They're just like, well, what can we privatise? Let's just do something random about this. Like, privatise the moon, shall we? And then it was treated as like a sincere topic of discussion by the media because it was part of these think tanks. They're nonsensical. But anyway, let's watch this clip.
Well, you know, the agenda that Liz Truss has been pushing in her media budget, you know, shrink the size of the state and fund in order to get big tax cuts. That's an agenda that organisations like the Institute for Economic Affairs have been pushing for years, including at Conservative Party conference, where they host a lot of events with ministers and where they boast that Liz Truss has been one of their most regular attendees at. And so I think it does matter who funds these organisations because...
And like Liz Truss is basically being groomed into her position by these people. Again, she was the previous person who was a Lib Dem, and then she just kind of went with the flow. Unless she's just some like long time like socialist sleeper agent, you know, being sent back through time to destroy the Tories from the heart, right? Like, she clearly has only one ambition, and that is to be Prime Minister to gain political power. And she was happy to take whatever money that she could to be able to get to that position. It just happened to be the people with all the money are the people who fund these libertarian think tanks. Crazy how that works, isn't it?
Because often people from these organisations appear, you know, quite rightly on programmes like this, and there isn't the question of who is actually funding the positions, funding the research.
Is your accusation with me sitting on this panel that somehow what I am saying is paid for?
Yes. Yes, it is. It is entirely paid for. You are a stooge for the bourgeois. All you exist to do, Emily, is to repeat bourgeois talking points and make the rich richer. That's what they pay you for. If they didn't think that it would be better for their bottom line, they wouldn't be giving you the money because they have fiduciary responsibility to generate profit for their shareholders. If the money that they were spending on your wages, Emily, was not profitable for them, they'd stop. That's why you exist. You exist to make money. You exist to make the rich richer. All your opinions are paid for. I wish people would just come out and say it. She's a propagandist. She's a propagandist. All she's doing is propaganda for rich people. That's all that it is. Come out and say it, right? Like, don't be coy. Oh, you're trying to imply my positions are paid for? Yes, 100% paid for.
Because that is incredible. It's no surprise that someone who believes in free markets in general might wish to work for a think tank that also believes in that. And it's no coincidence that a politician like Liz Truss might be more interested in the Institute of Economic Affairs than she would be with a left-wing think tank. That's how...
I mean, she wasn't particularly interested in a right-wing think tank when she was a Lib Dem member, was she? It was only strange how she changed tack to being very right-wing as soon as institutes popped up with loads of money to be able to fund her, to be able to implement their policy platforms. It's weird, isn't it? That's very strange. But even if she thinks that she's being totally and entirely sincere in her opinions, right, which she probably is, I don't even know. I don't care whether she's sincere in her opinions, quite frankly, because it doesn't really matter to me whether she's being sincere. What matters is the consequence of the rhetoric that she espouses and the material reality that she creates by people adopting her policy proposals. And is that, you know, she would not have the platform that she had if she had any other viewpoints. If she wasn't a libertarian free market think tanker, they wouldn't have employed her, and the money that flows down to her from the people who pay her bills, people expect to get extra returns of giving her that money, the rich people who, if they didn't stop doing that, would stop making money off it, would stop giving her money. Simple, like you invest for profit, not for a loss. It's not a difficult concept to be able to get behind. And they use that money to give her the platform that she does. And she wouldn't be here on this stage right now talking to us if her opinions were not being paid for by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Whether she believes in them or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether she's being sincere or not, because the only reason anybody's hearing any words that she has to say is because she has that dark money behind her. It's simple.
Things work, and the reason why we protect the privacy of our donors, because places like the Byline Times would go after them, right? You know.
Yes, good, rightly so. You've destroyed the country with shitty economic policy, and you should be called out and you should be derided for it. We need to know who these monsters are so that we can take them down, so that we can give them the proper accountability that they deserve for the ruination they've tried to inflict upon the economy. Like, so we're trying to protect our investors because people might go after them. Yeah, because you're worried that people will hate the fact that they're garbage. It's like how people say there isn't a conspiracy of rich people. It's just people acting in their class interests. Yeah, there was a book by there's some fucking liberal that's called the Dark Knight and the Puppet Master, which is essentially a liberal kind of dissection of what they think leftists believe. Is if, for example, they believe that Corbyn lost the election because there was a cabal of conspirators trying to destroy him from outside because they were just evil internally, which is like. It just shows how little liberals believe in materialism as a philosophical concept. Like, no, we just believe in incentive structures and material interests, right? They don't have to be evil. They just have to be in a position where they benefit systemically from engaging in the things that they do. As I said, if you are a CEO of a company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to generate profit for your shareholders. If you stopped doing things that benefit your shareholders, you'd stop giving the money to the think tanks. It's really simple, right? The system is set up for people to act within their, especially the bourgeois, to act within their specific class interests. So I don't really blame any of them specifically, but you got to blame the system. You got to blame the institutions, right? There's no people. That's why people are so quick to be able to throw the anti-Semitism accusation at leftists, because when they hear bourgeois or the moneyed class or the elites or the establishment or whatever, they think we mean Jews, because only in a liberal's mind, you can only be accusing people rather than systems. There has to be some puppet master at the top who controls things that would be the target of our. No. We hate capitalism. We hate a system which prioritizes this stuff. People are all just actors within the system, and that's why that accusation gets levied at the left so often.
People are allowed their privacy. It's a right. It's interesting if we look at.
Yeah, I understand that it's a right, and I'm not saying that they should have the state should force them. The state should come in and infiltrate their databases, trying to find out who funds them. But it's very telling about the institution or the institution's motives about the fact that they don't. That's what it is. No one's forcing you to give up your privacy. What we're saying is the fact that you're being private about this is incredibly telling about your political ideology.
Byline Times' shareholders, they're not so squeaky clean, are they, either? Max...
We're paid for
Mosley, by our... is it?
No. We are paid for by our subscribers.
We're entirely funded by our subscribers. Actual fascist.
We're entirely paid for by our subscribers. And people can look at who our shareholders are. And people...
Are they? Let me have a look. I didn't even know the funding of Byline Times. At least they're open about it, right? And she's trying to say, "Oh, I hate you because you're funded by somebody that I don't like." Well, we don't even know who funds you because you won't tell us. Crowdfunding. Subscriber funded Byline TV. It doesn't say. But either way, it's something that at least has some level of grassroots funding, which the IEA certainly doesn't have.
People can, and we put our subscribers on the front of our newspaper. People can't look at the IEA and see who funds them.
They can see a breakdown. They can see a breakdown. Some of our donors.
There's no real breakdown on the website.
Say where they're from.
Misleading listeners by suggesting there is. Nobody can go on your website and see who funds your organisation.
You can see where proportionately the spending comes from, the donation.
Like, Byline Times is fine. I hate the fact that the Liberals, they go after the left for nonsense accusations incredibly often. Peter Jukes is very cringe. But I like Hardeep Mataru, like, Marina Purkis is good to listen to. Like, I don't massively hate Byline Times. Like, they put out good content, and the investigative work they've done on Tory corruption has been useful and good. Like, I have no doubt that Peter Jukes is somebody with very pure intentions. I just get frustrated at how, about the fact they go and then they do go after the left. It's all they seem to only ever think that every single leftist is somehow a paid Russian actor, which, to be fair, some of them are. Like, we've all seen Jackson Hinkle, right? We've all seen George Galloway. But the fact that he seems to think that everybody who supports Jeremy Corbyn or supports, even basic social democratic platforms in the UK is somehow all part of this kind of Russian influence sphere. The Paul Mason map, the Paul Mason kind of weird diagram where he thinks that everyone's funded by Russians, which Peter Jukes kind of buys into. But the reporting, in general, is fine. Like, it's fine.
Nations come from.
What does that mean, proportionally? What does that mean? Can people go on your website?
Fundamentally, we protect the privacy of our donors.
So they can't?
They can look at the proportion, and also some of our donors do express that openly.
But you have to understand that if you aren't transparent, and what was the saying, transparency is the best form of disinfectant, if you aren't transparent, then of course people are going to think the worst, aren't they? They're going to imagine that a fossil fuel company will have paid you to come out with a report which says something that happens to be quite obliging to them. Now, I've had dealings with think tanks on the left and right for probably 30 years, and I genuinely don't believe that sort of thing goes on, that you have...
The problem, because again, Ian, you just think that everything has to be done because of some kind of ulterior motive, rather than it being a systemic issue with people's material interests. Like, and left think tanks being neoliberals or being like social liberals, right? Like the New Economic Foundation or whatever it is, just seems like social liberalism, really, to me. Just like Tom Tugendhat style, really.
Have paid.
Well, against...
Although I will not hear a word against whatever her bloody name is, the black woman. Miata Fanbale, that's the one. She's excellent. I really like her.
It's the law.
You have paid for research.
That's not what happens.
No, but don't you see that you're kind of feeding into this narrative that it does happen, and that's people suspect
I would believe that if it weren't for the fact that the accusations that come our way are by people who fundamentally disagree with the ideology or the policy proposals of our think tank.
Yeah, I mean, they disagree with them a hell of a lot more now, Emily. Now they've wrecked the country. But yeah, it's almost like people disagree with them because it's against their material interests to agree with them, because you are a propagandist for rich people. It's really simple. It's really simple, Emily. Like, again, just a basic level of material analysis, please. I'm begging every single liberal to just material analyze at least any situation. I'm just absolutely desperate for it. But yeah, as I said, it's just, we are here because the media willed it, and because the Conservative Party members are idiots. And the Conservative Party is going to get destroyed unless they do drastic changes now, and they only have themselves to blame. Very, very simple. Jeez, that segment was that was a long segment. That was a very, very long segment. Oh, sorry. I don't even know how the Streamlabs bot works to allow you to let me post links, but. I mean, that's the Daily Star, so it's not like a mainstream media company, really, is it? Although to be fair, probably a load of the media guys, now that they've realised that all of the nonsense libertarian stuff doesn't work, they're almost certainly going to get behind Keir Starmer now, because he's not promising any actual change. Like, he's deliberately trying to take a policy platform line that doesn't offer any fundamental change to be able to keep the media on side, at least nominally, right? At least the kind of at least what the people who someone might seem to be somewhat bipartisan. because he's essentially Keir Starmer is now advocating for himself as being the safe pair of hands for the country, as opposed to like the radical of Liz Truss. All the people who hated Corbyn, who voted late and voted Tory because of it, now all going to vote Labour, right? The same for nonsense reasons that are nonsensical, but you know, the way they've been propagandized to would make them see people like Truss and Corbyn as the same. Like, people with fundamentally opposing political ideologies can keep getting compared by liberal media. Well, yeah, because all the people in the media interviews all know that GB Energy isn't going to change fundamentally the way in which energy works in this country, apart from making it slightly greener. Because all it is just essentially a shell company to provide subsidy for green energy, for private green energy. It's just a subsidy farm. It's not going to actually own any production itself. Like, it's just another like investment thing. It's so, oh god, when I first heard the policy, I was excited, genuinely excited, not just because, you know, it felt like Keir Starmer was moving on from, you know, his desire to be as little like Jeremy Corbyn as possible, but also because I believe that even if he wasn't, there would at least be something there for a future left-wing prime minister to build on to try and expand. But there's nothing. It's just a slush fund. It's pointless. It's, oh god, it's so tilting. Fucking Keith. Fucking Keith. Keith. Anyway. So another group that's been given a lot of media coverage recently is a group called Just Stop Oil. Now, for the uninitiated, this is a pressure group who have a single policy, and that is for no more additional exploration on UK territory for new oil and gas deposits. And they've done loads of publicity stunts. They're very similar to Insulate Britain that I've done a segment on previously. It's pretty normal Ireland, to be fair, what's going on here. Basically what they've done is glued themselves to things a lot. They've been sitting in the middle of roads, blocking traffic. They've been gluing themselves to the pavement, gluing themselves to buildings, tying themselves to goalposts between football matches. Like, they've been doing a bunch of direct actions to try and get the government to try and U-turn on their policies regarding the energy, because they've wanted to. The Truss administration specifically has opened up new fracking licenses, or tried to open new fracking licenses, gifted new licenses to drill in new oil fields in the North Sea. So the Just Stop Oil are angry about this, and rightly so. You know, climate change is a big deal, and this government clearly, especially under Liz Truss, does not want to take it seriously. Amusingly, Boris Johnson was much better on this than Liz Truss. Another thing he was much better on, which is the list is growing every day. And there's been a recent new protest that they've done, which has racked up 23.8 million views in a day on Twitter, which is wild amount of reach, which, you know, something's been doing right. No, that was Greenpeace who held up signs during Liz Truss's speech, I think I made, if I remember correctly. Anyway, the latest stunt that they've done has caused quite a stir on the internet. Let's watch it. Security! Security! I love the sing-song way he did that. So yeah, they have thrown cans of soup over Vincent van Gogh's sunflowers, one of the many He did 5, I think it was in total. They threw soup over the photo and then glued themselves to the wall. Over the photo of the picture. Sorry, it's an oil painting. It's nothing to do with the actual protest. The reason why they're protesting here specifically is it's in the National Gallery, which has a partnership with British Petroleum. That's why, that's the context, right? A little bit of context for you guys there. But yeah, that's another thing that they've done as part of their direct action that they've been engaging in. This the original tweet that spawned all of it. They had something to say about it. Let's listen to what they had to say about it.
What is worth more? Art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice? Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people?
I mean, yeah, based. True. I will happily defend this shit. Not only because there's actually like a thin layer of perspex on top of the painting, so that painting is actually not damaged at all. All the people on Twitter getting mad because they felt that they'd destroyed a priceless artifact, when they actually hadn't. They just put a bit of soup on some of the frame. It's already cleaned and hanging back up again now, so nothing's gone, right? It was entirely symbolic. But it's provoked the wildest reaction, right? Like, they also did another protest today, which I think is better, which is spraying paint on the sign at Scotland Yard, which, based, fuck the police, let's go. But she's right? So essentially the theme of this protest really is that, the response to this has been apoplectic rage across huge many people because they think that they've destroyed this thing. I was like, okay, let's break this down, right? So you're upset about the theoretical, not even real, the theoretical destruction of something precious and irreplaceable, right? But you can see it. You see it directly happening. Someone actually going out of the way to do something specific in front of you that you can actually interact with, directly, right? You can see this person has gone here, taken this can of soup, put this on this painting. Theoretically, it's not actually happened. It's glass, but whatever. Let's go with it, right? But yet you won't stand up against people who are destroying something precious but irreplaceable that we literally require to be able to live, namely the bloody planet. Which, fair, they're right. Like, so it's a good analogy, right? I'm sure Vincent van Gogh would have been happy with it. Would have cheered them on properly. I don't know. I'm not gonna try and apportion some kind of view to somebody who lived centuries ago. Whatever, right? And most artists, I believe, would be happy with some level of thread, like whatever. Sure, he's probably too dead to care at this point. But like, whatever. As an artist, you would have all been for them destroying it, and so as a majority of fine art students who've talked to you today, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised, right? You have to have some level of empathy to be able to create art. So you probably have empathy for the planet, but that's a pretty large digression, but whatever. But they are 100% right. People are more angry about, theoretically, a painting being destroyed than they are about the entire world being destroyed by climate change, which is what's going to happen. And that's why they engaged in the protest that they did, as well as BP being linked to the National Gallery in general, like actually being funded by a petroleum company, right? So I get the rationale behind it, but like the reaction has been crazy. I got into a Twitter argument. He was very angry. I just trolling really. But some guy who literally said that he wanted to beat the children up in Minecraft. Like he would literally have said that these people would be better off if these kids didn't exist than there being paint on top of the glass on top of the painting. Like people have been calling for these children to get sent to prison, to be Minecrafted. Like is the level of kind of apoplectic rage that this has caused is like something I've never seen before. And I think part of it is because they know they're wrong, right? They know that nothing's going to happen with regards to climate. They know that the planet's on the way to destruction. And they hate the fact that someone's throwing it in their face. That's my guess at the very least, right? But even so, like, the other charges that people will always put on this and saying, oh, hang on a minute, if you use paint, for example, the paint will have acrylic in it. Acrylic is that they use in paint is a carbon chain molecule derived from first principles by crude oil. So you're using oil whilst wanting to stop oil. criticism, a hypocrite much? I left wing destroyed, as if that's just, you know, the Boars comic, the you participate in society meme all over again. But then saying, well, hang on a minute, if you want to stop climate change, surely it would be better for you to go and recycle and buy an electric car than it would be to throw soup on top of paintings. I'm like, you do not get it. You don't get that nothing will change with regards to climate change unless the state changes, right? It's going to be a fucking Leninist again. If you want to create change, you have to control the state. Like, the state is in charge of so much about, you know, the direction that the country goes in. At the moment, we have a state that is entirely beholden to the needs of the petrochemical industry, whether it be fracking, whether it be additional oil licenses, whether it be not windfall taxing them when we give them huge amounts of profit to pay for gas. And so, unless you take direct action, because, you know, not even, like, even though the majority of people in this country are in favour of action against climate change, the government still won't do anything, right? Because of the failures of representative democracy, something that is actually wanted by the majority of people in this country will not ever get put into place because of the power structures that exist, which feed the needs of the petrochemical industry into the government and the way it operates. So the only method that you have of actually getting any proper change, because it's the government that issues the oil licenses at the end of the day, right? You can recycle as much as you want, but you're not going to change the fact that those oil licenses will get given out by the government unless you take this action. And people are just like, I can't believe, well, why would somebody do this? And then, you know, it's got 23 million views. That's why they're doing it. And people will retweet, like Ben Shapiro retweeting it, going, you've definitely stopped climate change now. I'm like, well, no, but we're all talking about climate change now. The whole media feed has been just Liz Truss and climate and soupy paintings, right? But the fact that people prioritize, again, huge swathes of people that prioritize, well, I should probably say they prioritize this painting, not just over the life of the planet in general, but also thinking that it's worth more than these kids' lives, right? People genuinely want these children Minecrafted. I'm going to protect my advertising revenue by using euphemism, but they genuinely do. It was crazy shit in the replies. And people saying, oh, well, this is just going to turn people away from the climate movement. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. People usually forget this stuff, right? People have already kind of forgotten, mostly like the guy who tied himself to the goalposts at a Tottenham Hotspur match, right? People will forget this thing eventually, but people will continue remembering Just Stop Oil. They'll continue remembering the climate crisis. And, you know, considering the rolling news cycle that we have and the attention economy, if you don't continue making a noise, people will forget about it. And people have continued to forget about it, right? Like, so unless you continue taking drastic action that gets you media spotlight, well, of course they will. And again, social media algorithms would are just as much to blame for this. And the way you make yourself known is by being outrageous. And that's the world that we live in now, where if the more contentious you are, the more you get kind of algorithmically boosted by the social media apps that we use. So again, like, I would reiterate, 23.9, almost 24 million views now. Someone threw cake at the Mona Lisa, most people don't know about. So yeah, again, it's the deals who go viral on Twitter. Although it's interesting, right, how when it was someone trying to restore that kind of, was that fresco of Jesus, where I forget where it was now, and then doing a hilariously bad job of it. Everyone thought this was funny, even though it was a priceless artifact, right? When actually it got ruined for no good reason because someone was an idiot. Everyone found it was funny. But then as soon as this happens and it's ostensibly for a good cause, people lose their shit. And it's almost because I think boomers just hate children. They just genuinely have like a visceral hatred of the younger generation, which we've seen, right? All the segments that we watch, all the articles that we've read going, actually, it'd be good to have rolling blackouts because it means the children would be miserable. And I like it when, like, they're all entitled, despite the fact that boomers are the most entitled generation. We'll get to that later, right? But they're just disgusted by the existence of a younger generation with a different worldview and political ideology. Because let's not remember, it's the boomer vote that continually swings elections around the world in favour of the petrochemical industry because they're so easily propagandized. Like, so yeah, I fully stand behind them. Based critical support. Let's fucking go. The painting's not damaged. People are talking about climate change. Mission accomplished. What are we going to watch? What are we going to watch? What are we going to watch? Oh, I'm just going to slightly point out that people continually blaming Brexit, right? Liberals will continue to say that, oh, I can't believe the political turmoil we're in. It's all the fault of Brexit. Brexit is to blame for all of this. And I'm like, nah, mate, Brexit's the symptom. Not the cause, it's the symptom, right? Again, press complicity in pushing neoliberalism and pushing these ideologies, right? Pushing the hatred of immigrants and things like that as a media class that have always been at the center of kind of the things, the discussions that we have about political policy. This is what's happened, right? All of the austerity of the 2010s, all of the things that happened then, all of the ways in which the culture of this country has been eroded, the move towards a neoliberal framework that's made everybody into self-centered, non-communitarian people, right? This is the breakdown of society that we've got, and this caused Brexit, and that's the symptom. It shows how liberals were just not affected by austerity whatsoever, that they suddenly believe that the big turning point was Brexit. Like, it's not even in my top 5 sins of the Cameron administration. It's not as bad as your health and social character. It's not as bad as austerity. It's not as bad as universal credit. It's not as bad as tuition fees. And it's not as bad as the NATO intervention in Libya. Like, these are all things that are materially worse than Brexit. But liberals are far more concerned about whether or not they can get an easy visa-free trip to the French Alps than they do about the poor people in their own country. Simple as that. The incuriosity of liberals, yeah, 100%. Yeah, do it.
This video was made possible.
Oh, let's watch Tom Nicholas. Let's fucking go. And like the blue team, like the red team, blue team, the team sports mentality of politics. That's the one. That's the thing that really gets to me, really frustrates me. Because again, they call themselves the adults in the room, and they really aren't. I think, and they also think that politics is just when politicians do things, and not a part of policy. Sensibelium with the resub on tier 1 for 3 months. Welcome back to the No Justice stream. I hope you're doing well. Always appreciate the support. Thank you very much for joining again. They don't realise that politics is everything, really. Like, politics is anything that happens with regards to policy making, or what happens with regards to political economy, right? Critiquing political economy is something that liberals just don't do, right? Anyway, let's watch this Tom Nicholas video. Should be good. Some good palate cleansing React Andy content. And we love Tom Nick. We stand Tom Nicholas on this channel. He's excellent.
Possible by Curiosity Stream and Nebula. In today's video, we're going to examine how trans rights, and trans people more broadly, are discussed in the media.
Just gonna grab a drink.
In particular, we're going to explore how an increasing obsession with the so-called trans debate, even in news outlets which describe themselves as liberal or progressive, has created a cultural environment in which deeply dehumanizing arguments can be framed as entirely reasonable, sensible contributions to a respectable discussion. Doing so is, naturally, going to involve looking at a bunch of examples of people making transphobic arguments. So, if that doesn't sound like something you need in your life right now, feel free to give this one a miss. Which, on the theme of things I wish I could give.
Yeah, I'm fucking inoculated from that shit. Spend far too much time arguing with Twitter TERFs. I mean, I'll block them all now, but Katie Montgomery retweets it all onto my timeline anyway. So yeah. I'm not bothered about hearing this stuff. I can deal with it. I have my vaccination.
A miss. I'm afraid we need to start at the extremes by talking for slightly longer than I would like about transphobic provocateur and Daily Wire host Matt Walsh. On the 1st of June 2022, the conservative news site turned media company The Daily Wire released an original documentary called What is a Woman? Directed by Justin Folk and presented by Matt Walsh, the promo for the film suggested that it would be an inquisitive attempt by a...
Wait, Matt Walsh is just the worst person on the planet, right? Like, if the one person on the planet we're better off without is Matt Walsh, surely.
Controversial, yet committed truth seeker to gain some clarity around contemporary attitudes towards sex and gender, with a particular focus on gender transition.
What are you doing here? I'm asking these questions. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what a woman is. That's why I'm here. And this is the Women's March. I figured it's a good place to find out. I've come all this way to ask that question. Can anyone tell me what a woman is?
You are not here for women. We ask you to leave.
What is that? How am I harassing? I'm asking a question.
As anyone with even the slightest knowledge of Matt Walsh...
I mean, he was the person who tweeted out, or he not tweeted out, there's previous evidence of him saying that, you know, there should be no such thing as adolescents, and treating adolescents like children is stopping women in their prime from breeding or so. I have no idea what he said, but it was bad. It was bad.
Or any of the other weird little dudes at the Daily Wire would have come to expect, however, this is nonsense. In reality, the film is little more than a 90-minute diatribe against trans people. The film can broadly be divided into three kind of acts. The first, which we'll talk about in more detail later, does broadly cling to the pretense of Walsh being a well-intentioned documentarian.
I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4. I host a talk show. I give speeches. I write books. I like to make sense of things.
As we'll see later, Walsh certainly asks some, probing questions of his subjects, but the first 20 minutes of the documentary are spent mostly interviewing healthcare professionals and one academic who are either trans themselves or trans-affirming in their practices.
What do you mean by assigned female? Who assigns female?
Yeah.
I say mostly interviewing trans-affirming professionals because perhaps to reassure the Daily Wire's core audience that the documentary's not going to be too even-handed, they also managed to squeeze in a chat with this guy, whose qualifications to appear in a documentary about trans rights and healthcare amount to him running a Star Wars shop. And also, I guess, this.
Because I got a dick.
Even if one is charitable enough to take the more reasonable-seeming sections in this first act at face value, however, by the second section of the film, the pretense of reasonable...
By the way, if you also enjoy this content, just like Sensibilium, you can also subscribe for $3.99 or for free with Twitch Prime by linking your Amazon Prime to Twitch account. Or you can become a member on YouTube and it's just 99p.
Disinterested inquiry has been dropped.
Cheaper than a can of Relentless.
In time. Over the course of the next 50 minutes, we're introduced to an ever-expanding cast of anti-trans activists and conspiracy theorists. Now, with some of these interviewees, you can at least see how they've developed the views they hold. This guy, Scott Nugent, for example, clearly had a very bad experience with transition.
I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male. I will never be a man.
And while he talks a lot of dangerous nonsense in this interview, freely misinterpreting research and...
I hate to go all Judith Butler, but like, you just look at him and you go, well, who doesn't look at him and, or I don't know what pronouns they use, whatever, and who would look and say that's not a man? Like, come on.
Citing some completely made-up statistics, there's obviously some real hurt that's led to Nugent being sat in that chair opposite Matt Walsh. Most of the...
True. Is it cheap? Isn't Heinz tomato soup like 80p? I don't know, like, see, with CPI being what it is. But with CPI being what it is, maybe a can of Heinz soup is now over 99p. I wouldn't be surprised, but I thought it was about 80p for Heinz soup. 3 for 2, let's fucking go. I see these conservatives create an entire alternate reality as copium in their own films, Matt Walsh document, Hunter Biden film, their own science. Well, yeah, exactly. Again, there was a really telling Reddit post a while back, which was like, what did it say? It said, something like, I hate how all the science agrees with leftists because now they get to have co-opted the facts don't care about your feelings stuff, which is supposed to be our phrase. Can someone point me towards some conservative science, please? And I was like, this is the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Interviewees, however, are serial right-wing grifters, for whom the current anti-trans moral panic is just the latest focal point in a long-standing traditionalist agenda. Take this woman, Miriam Grossman, for instance. Where other medical professionals interviewed during the film are portrayed as completely unhinged cranks, Grossman is offered up as one of the good ones, unspoiled by so-called gender ideology. Which is unsurprising, given that prior to boarding the right-wing disinformation gravy train a decade ago, Grossman seems to have spent most of her medical career as an in-house college psychiatrist, rather than having any kind of specialism in trans healthcare. The most revealing of the several segments which feature
£1.40, bloody hell. The Vimes Boots Index gone mad.
Grossman comes about 50 minutes into the documentary when Grossman is asked to talk about schools.
All right, Heather.
The particular idea that the film is trying to plant in our heads at this point is that schools are somehow encouraging children who would otherwise be completely content with the gender that they were assigned at birth to falsely come out as trans. As evidence for this, Grossman holds up a book called It's Perfectly Normal.
Okay, it's perfectly normal for 10 years and up.
In order to highlight its age recommendation, she's even drawn arrows pointing to the box on the cover as though it's some secret and not printed in eye-catching red. Within the context of everything we've been hearing about in the film so far, one would assume that this book is some kind of...
And even then, Heinz tomato soup isn't even that good. I'm gonna throw shade at Heinz tomato soup here. Unless you get Tesco value just tastes the same, or you can just make your own. It's £1 for a bag of tomatoes.
Instruction manual teaching kids how to become trans. Yet, that's not what It Perfectly Normal is at all. This book is actually a pretty broad primer on puberty, sex, and relationships. The copy of the book that Grossman shows to Walsh was published way back in 1994. That's a full 28 years and almost my entire lifetime ago. Do you want to guess how many references to trans people there are in this book? If you guessed only one, you would be incorrect because it's 0. An updated version of the book published in 2014 did amend this, but even then, whilst it's quite a nice affirmational little section, it only amounts to 12 fairly short sentences which do little more than explain that trans people exist. It only promotes becoming trans to the extent that this encyclopedia of South American birds promotes becoming a horned screamer. Side note, cracking cover design job on that book, by the way. It's proper top stuff. Always judge a book by its cover. While most of What is a Woman's anger is reserved for trans people then, there are also plenty of moments when these broader right-wing resentments slip out. Grossman, for example, turns out not only to be against acknowledgements of trans and queer people in schools, but in favour of abolishing sex and relationships education entirely. I always need to get a man who gives us this gem.
We need to acknowledge that there are powerful lobby groups, powerful cultural and political lobby groups driving this thing. Hollywood.
What? Powerful political lobby groups? That's definitely something the right wing has never done in the entirety of history.
Is pressing LGBTQ plus matters in so many movies. We're seeing it in the way Amazon sets up its algorithms.
You heard it here first, folks. The Amazon algorithm is gay now. Joking aside, by the third act of the film, What is a Woman has become driven...
Again, it comes back down to in that the culture has changed first, right? A lot of the time with capitalism, that will happen. When it's something that's culturally completely unrelated to capitalism in general, like there's no profit motive there's no inherent profit motive to promoting LGBT causes, right? But as the culture changes and LGBT stuff becomes more acceptable and becomes more mainstream, and suddenly a market develops out of it, people want to play to that market, right? If, for example, the majority of Americans support Black Lives Matter, companies will want to virtue signal towards Black Lives Matter because they'll make more money out of doing it than they won't, because they have a fiduciary responsibility to generate profit for their shareholders. Like, again, no material analysis from the right whatsoever, because they genuinely think, they say, this is lobby group for trans issues, trying to trans our children, and they can't tell you why. They just can't. That's why they have to invent myths about it being groomers and people, pedophiles or whatever, etc. Because they can't properly articulate for you, other than it's an evil cabal wanting to attack our children. They can't articulate any kind of proper incentive as to why they would do it. Why? Why would they do it? I can tell you why. Because it's profitable. Because people are pro-trans. People are pro-LGBT in the year of our Lord 2022. So they make money out of doing it. It's very simple.
Entirely by unhinged conspiracism. There's also a stylistic shift, in which we leave behind the talking head format which has dominated the film thus far, and are invited to follow Walsh as he undertakes a series of stunts intended to expose the absurdity of so-called gender ideology.
I'm done asking questions.
One of these stunts sees Walsh write a children's book called Johnny the Walrus, about a young boy who, wait for it,
of hilarious response to this.
Identifies as a walrus.
Johnny's a boy with a big imagination. One day he's a dog, the next day a crustacean.
I love how he literally looks like a paedophile wearing that like jumper Like, he doesn't, whilst trying to look like some kind of homely, like, Santa type fellow who would write a children's book and be all kind of fatherly or whatever. He just looks like a paedophile. He just looks like a child predator. The beard doesn't help.
Johnny's mom loves her son's make-believe time. You're Johnny the Walrus till you change your mind.
This is obviously a super original gag, and not just a lazy cross between I sexually identify as an attack.
Like, the shots of him typing on the typewriter, it reminds me of the scene from Monkey Dust, with the guy who the paedophile who pretends to be a girl on like web chat, and you see his grotesque fingers typing at the keyboard. That's what those typewriter shots remind me of.
Helicopter, and that 2018 episode of Last Week Tonight, in which John Oliver released a satirical children's book about Mike Pence's bunny rabbit. The more visceral third act stunt, however, is that in which Walsh attends a school board meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia. The background here is that Loudoun County School Board was looking to pass a set of policies which would, among other things, require teachers to use students' correct pronouns and affirm trans students' right to use the bathrooms which correspond with their gender. In truth, this was simply a formalisation of already common practices in local schools. Yet, right-wingers descended on the county in an attempt to turn it into a cause célèbre. As the film tells it, Walsh travels over from his home in Nashville to join the raucous. Yet, when he gets there, he finds that the school board has introduced rules requiring anyone who wants to attend a meeting to prove that they're a resident of the county. Which, yeah, obviously. Nevertheless, Walsh finds a solution.
That's right. Conservative commentator Matt Walsh told me he's leasing out someone's basement in Loudoun County so he'll be able to speak during tonight's meeting.
Which, I will say, there's an amazing lack of self-awareness to a guy.
It's really important to understand here as well. The reason why this trans panic groomer stuff about what's happening in schools is happening in the United States, the only reason why we're having this conversation right now is because there was a concerted push by the right in America on a local level to try and influence more school choice policies into local government, right? And obviously that's going to involve some kind of plebiscite. So there's going to need to get local support for changing measures to introduce reforms to get more school choice as a political policy platform in local government. And so they created a moral panic around teachers teaching pro-LGBT stuff in schools and calling them groomers, deliberately to try and promote things like school choice as a policy platform and homeschooling, to try and get rid of this, mostly try and undermine public education in the United States. That's where all of this has been concocted from. It's a Christopher Rufo stunt, because it always is a Christopher Rufo stunt. But that's the only reason why any of this is happening. Like, so when you hear people kind of try and bring this stuff over to the UK, say, well, they're grooming kids in our schools by being pro-trans, there's no ulterior motive. They don't understand the reason why they're doing it, because there's no political kind of campaign behind any of this other than just being nasty to trans people. At least the Americans have the good grace to have an ulterior motive behind their hatred.
As generally creepy as Matt Walsh, going to such great lengths to gain access to a school building, including hiring out a basement, which is objectively the creepiest of all residential dwellings, and then for him to accuse others of having ill intentions for children. The sequence ends with Walsh giving his speech to the school board meeting. The address is the cruel, hate-filled screed of a religious fundamentalist. It involves accusing school administrators of being child abusers, a cult, fanatics, for the simple act of trying to create a safe learning environment for some of their most vulnerable students. These 60 seconds are really the truth of the film. All that pretense at genuine inquiry and the attempts at comedy are stripped away, and what we're left with is an insecure grifter using children as a prop to push a cruel, transphobic agenda. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, this was always going to be the case. The Daily Wire was never going to have produced an even-handed, informative documentary about gender or Matt Walsh or what is a woman. See, what kept jumping out to me as I watched this film was how familiar the tone of those early sections in which Walsh interviews trans-affirming professionals felt. And not to the work of other extreme right-wing provocateurs, but to the manner in which many supposedly respectable mainstream news outlets, particularly in the UK, have increasingly begun to frame discussions of trans people and their rights in recent years. But before we go any further, I want to suggest that if you're finding this video interesting, then you might also like to check out another video that I made about the media, which looks at how bad actors on the political right use organisations called think tanks to push certain stories and perspectives in the news. To do so on my streaming service, Nebula. Nebula was founded by a bunch of educational and education-adjacent creators who wanted to be less beholden to algorithms and demonetization systems when making videos. Unlike YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, Nebula is owned by the creators who publish on it. This ensures we have more say in how the platform is run, and allows us to create bigger and bolder videos for our lovely viewers. That's you. And also to present them in a premium, ad-free viewing experience. One in which, if you follow a creator, you'll actually get a notification when they put out a new video. Once you're finished watching my video about think tanks, for example, you're probably going to want to stick around and watch Second Thoughts videos about media bias, as well as Mia Mulder's video about trans women in sport. Now, if the idea of early and exclusive content from all your favourite creators sounds intriguing, then you're going to want to know that the best way to sign up to Nebula is through a deal that we've put together with the folks over at CuriosityStream. This allows you to get access to both platforms for less than it would cost to sign up to either on its own. So, I guess I need to start by sharing a shocking revelation with you. Britain has new information. As the deluge
Hey there, Pickleby. Hope you're doing well.
of Turf Island memes one is met with whenever one mentions the UK in certain spaces online might suggest, for several years now, Britain's descent into a full-blown transphobic moral panic has been impossible to ignore. For folks living in the UK, and particularly to British culture, as queuing, fish and chip shops, and laundering the wealth of Russian oligarchs. But the phenomenon has also gained plenty of international attention. American news outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN, have all commissioned British writers.
Yes, no, it's not because it's because they hate Britain. Have you not heard how the New York Times hates Britain for reporting factually about things that happen without a biased lens through somebody who literally refuses to make any criticism of the UK from within the UK?
To try and make sense of this curious phenomenon for the benefit of perplexed readers outside of the country. And at the political level, the Council of Europe, which monitors human rights abuses and administers the European Convention on Human Rights, issued a formal condemnation of the UK government for backsliding on protections for trans people. How and why the UK arrived at this point is
also worth noting, at that meeting of the Council of Europe, where they listed the UK alongside Poland, Russia and Hungary for their attacks on LGBT rights, it was the Labour MP's delegation to this meeting who tabled an amendment to try and remove the UK from that criticism. Tonya Antonazzi was one of the people. She is incredibly transphobic. The Labour Party is shit. Fuck the Labour Party.
Complicated, multi-factored story which would require an entire video all to itself. What's evident, however, is that the rise of UK transphobia has been an acutely top-down affair. Over in the US, the stereotypical transphobe is most likely to be a MAGA hat-wearing, small-town-dwelling, fundamentalist Christian. By contrast, the leaders of Britain's anti-trans crusade have been secular, wealthy, educated metropolitans. Furthermore, where, in other countries, the fueling of bigoted sentiment is usually the preserve of arguably fringe, right-wing outlets such as the Daily Wire or Breitbart, in the UK, a suspicion towards trans people has come to guide the reporting of media institutions across the political spectrum. In fact, among the publications that have been most influential in rallying opposition to trans rights in Britain have been The Guardian and The New Statesman. These are periodicals which are thought of within British culture as being
New Statesman, more like The New Spectator. Hey!
Progressive to the point of parody. Yet both have seemingly adopted opposition to trans rights as a central plank of their editorial line. The relationship between this British form of polite, liberal transphobia and the more obviously cruel,
basically the reason why it's those papers in particular is because they're the lovey-doveys of the liberal media class who see themselves as being ostensibly socially progressive, right? The kind of the second wave feminists, and second and early third wave feminists, mostly second wave feminists, 40, 50 something Guardian readers who believe that they are still in a fight, although I guess we are still in a fight with women's rights, obviously, essentially rape is still de facto legal in this country. But, they feel like all of their time being a feminist means that they have all of the progressive chops that they need, right? And so with themselves becoming older and being a little less worse off and getting a little protections that you get from being a little bit older and a little bit wealthier, Suddenly a lot of the fight has gone. Suddenly a lot of the fight about what it was like being a feminist in those times when things were much more kind of fundamental rather than cultural, about the rights that you need to have access to as a woman. A lot of that's been fought for and won now. So there's no fight left. There's nothing to fight. There's no kind of political fight that they want to engage in to make it feel like their activism is relevant. And now they found a perfect thing to get angry about so they can be politically engaged once over again. And it just involves becoming bigots and wanting to wear the boot and be the bully because it feels good.
Conservative transphobia typified by What is a Woman is complicated. In July 2022, the accidental queen of the UK movement, J.K. Rowling, had a brief interaction with Matt Walsh on Twitter. Rowling criticised Walsh's self-aggrandising approach, only to then praise What is a Woman as doing a good job exploding the incoherence of gender identity theory and some of the harms it's done. Julie Bindel, a journalist who has been a key figure in popularising trans-exclusionary radical feminism in Britain over the past 2 decades, similarly claimed that, whilst the film had loads of sexism in it, it was still well worth a watch. For context, this is a film
Julie Bindel, big sexism fan, he's known.
For which this is the final scene.
What is a woman?
An adult human female.
She fucking went there.
Who needs help opening this?
Still, well worth a watch for all good feminists, I guess. Nevertheless, Rowling and Bindel are somewhat unique, in that both have been entirely consumed by transphobia, to the point that it's become their whole brand. I mean, I guess you've got to pivot to something when no one wants to watch your films anymore. Given the prominence of...
Or read your incredibly cringe-worthy detective novels, which are longer than fucking Dune, and are just tweets. Lots and lots of tweets.
...afforded to What is a Woman by the wild amounts of money that the Daily Wire spent promoting the film.
Yeah, like literally writing self-insert victim complex fanfiction.
Including more than $1 million in ad spend on Facebook alone. It was probably impossible for liberals that have gone all in on transphobic moral panic to avoid some kind of alliance of convenience with Walsh and BBC or Sky News or Wales Online or wherever else had anything in common with the openly hateful, opportunistic bigotry of Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire. In fact, in 2019, the Independent Press Standards Organisation published this report, which sought to analyse changing trends in how British newspapers had reported on trans issues in the years between 2009 and 2019. And pretty much all of the
like the brain rot that kind of has infected UK journalism, which I'm fucking gonna call them. I'm gonna talk shit about UK journalists again. That's what this channel's for. Is talking shit about UK journalists apparently like 24/7. Because they all went to the same private schools, they all went to the same media institutions, they've all kind of the incestuous same ideology that they've all just kind of nonsensically adopted together. And they've been, essentially, because they're all private school trust fund babies who went to Cambridge and Oxford, none of them, they all refuse to admit to anybody that they may be wrong on something. They view themselves as the arbiters of truth with the bringers of received wisdom, right? And so anybody who so much as suggests that they might be wrong about something, like on social media, right? Someone from a member of the mob saying they go, "Oh, I'm being cancelled on Twitter," when really it's just they previously had, but in a time before social media, they never had any pushback to their quote unquote received wisdom. And now that they are getting criticised for being idiots who are wrong about everything, suddenly they are feeling incredibly taken aback that maybe they're not as the daring truth tellers that they say they are, and actually just establishment shills.
And other newspaper staff interviewed for the study were adamant that journalists have adopted a more respectful approach to stories concerning transgender subjects than at the start of the decade. Now, there is one very small way in which this is true. As that same report highlighted, over the past decade, there has been a significant drop-off in the use of outright slurs in trans-adjacent newspaper articles. In 2009 and 2010, around 10% of articles about trans people published in the British media used language which the study very generously describes as being considered offensive. By 2019, that figure was down to just 1%. Which, well done British media, you did it, you solved transphobia. Okay, obviously not. Don't get me wrong, a decrease in outright slurs is clearly good, but that alone doesn't mean that the reporting that you're doing is necessarily respectful or balanced or even accurate. All of which brings us to this clip. A British politician and current leader of the UK Labour Party, Keir Starmer, being interviewed by the BBC's Andrew Marr. Now, those of you watching from outside the UK probably don't spend a massive portion of your time thinking about the UK Labour Party. And I envy you. Really, I do. But Starmer is essentially the platonic ideal of the wannabe sensible centrist.
He's just Bill Clinton, right? If you would take any American politician that you want to have as a corollary to Keir Starmer, absolutely 100% Bill Clinton. No shot.
Super reluctant to make any policy pledges and is highly conflict averse in interviews. He essentially makes Joe Biden look like a peppy, charismatic radical. Some of this timidity was on display in his chat with Andrew Marr. The exchange was recorded in September 2021 in Brighton, where the Labour Party were holding their annual conference. This was Starmer's first such event as party leader, and against a backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, a government corruption scandal, and plenty of internal party divisions at the conference itself, the question which Marr was desperate for Starmer to answer was this.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Once more, for those at the back.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Okay, so there is some context here relating to Labour MP Rosie Duffield, who over the past year had been performing a kind of low-rent J.K. Rowling tribute act of making increasingly transphobic comments and then playing the victim whenever people disagreed with her. More interesting than what led to this question being asked, however, is what happens next. See, Starmer's answer wasn't awful.
Well, it is something that should have...
Literally, the Conservatives were falling apart. We had swathes of dead people because of the pandemic, whilst huge government corruption is going on in every single possible department, scandal after scandal, and the media rounds was just, can a woman have a penis? That was the question that every Labour MP got asked, rather than, what do you think about this corruption scandal? It's, what about the lady penis? We would like to know about the mouthfeel of the feminine penis. It was utterly absurd. It was comical.
He said it is not right.
But it was kinda awkward. You can almost hear the fans speeding up in his brain as he tries to compute an answer which will please as many people as possible.
It is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right.
But while it might not make for great politics, politicians squirming like this does make for good television. Starmer's awkward non-answer signalled to the media that trans issues were a topic which could be used to catch Labour politicians off guard. When Starmer's colleague and essentially second in command, Rachel Reeves, appeared on radio station LBC the next day, right-wing host Nick Ferrari thus decided to ask her the same question.
But I have to put it to you, the same question that was put to the party leader, is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix? Good morning.
Which nothing says British journalist in the early 2020s more than asking someone about cervixes before you've even said good morning.
Good morning.
Reeves's answer also started well.
I just think that this issue has just become so divisive and toxic, and it pits people against each other, both groups who face discrimination in society, women and trans women. And I just find this debate incredibly unhelpful and unproductive, to be totally honest.
Good on, Rachel. That's a pretty cracking answer, actually. Like, proper decisive. You really nips that one in the bud. But then, when pushed further...
Look, is it transphobic? Look... I don't even...
Sorry, I'm gonna stop deep throating the microphone now. I'm a good streamer. I make good content. Sorry.
Know how to start answering these questions.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. God, it was going so well, Rachel. From here on out, over the next 6 months...
Just stop saying... Just don't say... The answer really isn't just, who can care whether it's transphobic or not? Like... trans men have cervixes, they're not women. There you go. Case closed.
There was a 50-50 chance that any appearance by a Labour politician on TV or the radio would, sooner or later, end in them being asked some question about gender and genitalia.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix, David?
But trans women are women, from your perspective. Is that right?
Are you comfortable defining what a woman is?
So a woman can have a penis?
Do I think that women were born with penises? Yes. Do you agree with her?
Now, Labour Party politicians weren't the only ones being pressed
to be fair, there were some based answers. It was Emily Thornberry, I think it was. let me find where it was. I can't find the clip now. Oh well, it was Emily. It was actually Emily Thornberry who literally was asked, and she's like, "Well, how many trans men are men, and they get pregnant?" So yeah, there you go. Case closed, Columbo. And it's like, yeah, okay, good. Finally, someone had the balls to stick up for it, or the cervix in this case, to just put their head above the parapet and just say, yeah, no, trans men can get pregnant. They're men. Simple.
Declare their interpretation of the meaning of womanhood. As we'll see towards the end of this video, in the period since the Conservative Party...
Oh yeah, Rachel Reeves is like the queen of red team versus blue team. She used to work for the Bank of England, and she hates people who are on benefits, and she wants there to be more deportations. She's fucking rancid. I despise her.
Has increasingly sought to turn trans rights into a wedge issue. The reason that Labour MPs have had to field these questions so much more than politicians from other parties is that their responses have consistently been absolute car crashes. The mere mention of trans people seems to cause senior Labour Party figures to turn into whimpering little messes. These presenters all probably feel as though they're doing an excellent job here. And by the metrics that really matter in contemporary journalism, they are. These exchanges make for great social media content and tend to get a decent amount of clicks. Far more, at least, than videos of politicians talking about...
You're literally looking at that one, the Rachel Reeves question. The tagline is about a business rates system, a normal question to ask the Shadow Chancellor. And then the first opening gambit is about fucking cervixes. This media landscape is horrendous.
Taxes or whatever else. But that aside, in these interviews, even the most right-wing of these presenters will no doubt comfort themselves that they've not sought to push an agenda at all here. But
it's always amusing when we ever talk about media bias in this country, there's always an Andrew Marr clip, and I'm always just like, play the Chomsky clip. You gotta play the Chomsky clip right now. Please, just play the Chomsky clip.
Really been asking questions. This facade of just asking questions often allows journalists to convince themselves as much as their viewers that they are of a completely different breed to motivated conspiracists like Matt Walsh. They're not screaming in the faces of a school board accusing them of child abuse, but talking calmly and politely in the studio of a respected news organisation. And yet, Walsh spends a good hour of his film warming up to that big finale. For the entire opening third of What is a Woman, his approach is practically identical to that of these mainstream British news presenters. And this got me thinking, maybe there's an opportunity here. Even if we acknowledge that there are some important differences between What is a Woman and these interviews in the British media, maybe the abundant similarities have a lot to teach us about what's really going on in these discussions about gender and trans rights in the UK press. Now, some of you might be thinking that it's a bit strange to have gotten this far through a video about journalists obsessing over the definition of the word woman without having provided some kind of answer to that question. Surely by now there should have been a section in which I crack the spot.
I mean, I was literally thinking about that, right? The first critique that someone's going to have is, yeah, you answer the question.
Yeah. On some dusty old copy of the Oxford English Dictionary and take you through some etymology or something. Which, if I did, would reveal that the word derives from the Old English term wifman, or wife person, which seems a little bit problematic. The fact of the matter is, however, that none of the interviewers in any of the conversations we've looked at in this video are remotely interested in the definition of womanhood. Let me explain. See, if you sit down to watch What is a Woman, you will very quickly notice that its style is pretty derivative. As I mentioned earlier, it outright pinches gags from John Oliver and also takes some cues from Michael Moore and from The Daily Show. The cultural reference that kept leaping into my mind as I was watching the film, however, was this guy.
My name is Borat. I like you.
As a reminder, in this first act of what...
Yeah, like, it's crazy. I've said on stream before as well, that so much of the time, people's only actual... only actual kind of contact with what J.K. Rowling says. They ever actually read her tweets, right? Or understand her positions, or even read the essays that she's done, right? She's done whole fucking essays about the shit. They'll only ever read it in the context of what they've read in news articles. So you'll get loads of people who always say, What's J.K. Rowling said that's transphobic? I've never seen her being transphobic. People are just getting angry because she's just asking questions or wanting to take up women's rights when she's literally called, she's allied herself with new theocratic fascists or whatever. She's called for all trans healthcare to be gotten rid of. She's called for the repeal of the Gender Recognition Act. She hates us. She wants to exterminate us. Like, she said so many horrendous and horrific things, but the media don't ever report on it because they fundamentally believe the same things that she does.
As a woman, Matt Walsh almost exclusively interviews healthcare professionals and one academic who are trans-affirming in their practices. If we take the film on face value, this is supposed to be Walsh giving supporters of trans rights an opportunity to explain their understanding of sex and gender. Throughout, however, it's evident that Walsh is playing something of a character. Of course, I don't doubt that Matt Walsh is a pretty intellectually incurious guy, but he's obviously hamming it up a bit. I mean, with a very slightly different framing, this could all be a very, very good parody of the exact genre of confused by modern life bloke that Matt Walsh is.
Being a dad is one of the great privileges of my life.
Well, I need the loo, so I'm going to pause that 1 second. I'm going to play some of my own content whilst I'm in the loo. Please do enjoy that, and I'll be back as quick as I can. What segment should we watch? Let's watch this bit about John Cleese. Fuck it, let's watch that. I'm gonna be right back. Sorry to be disappearing for a sec. I shall be as quick as I can. So some niche program about John Cleese ranting about the youth and the arguments that he's got on the Bird app. Why would the BBC commission this? You know that it's going to be terrible. That's why GB News have commissioned it, and the BBC said, no, we don't want to touch it. So it's literally just Old Man Yells at Cloud the musical, really, at this point. No one's tuning into Talk TV on their Freeview box. They're watching actual entertainment programming on the other channel. But what they are as far as the algorithm is concerned. If you remember. And he's gone on an anti-woke crusade. I've done a video of him previously where he stormed off. He has become like peak in front of the fire. And maybe he'll be... And his new program is with GB News. Noted noted copy of Fox News, but British style. You put Union Jack on it, do exactly the same thing, get funding from similar places. I mean, not Murdoch, but might as well be at this point. But yeah, he's super fucking reactionary now. But I digress. He's joined GB News because he believes they're a free speech channel because he'll get cancelled if he goes anywhere else. So I've got a lot to say about this particular issue, but he's done an interview on GB News about his new show, which we're going to watch first, and then we'll have some commentary on the things that he said on social media as well.
We're going to crack on this third section with Tuesday's Guardian, bringing us a story about a major development here at GB News.
Yes, John Cleese to host GB News show as he railed against cancel culture, and he's quoted people at GB saying that people say it's a right-wing channel, it's actually a free speech channel, which of course is true, but you wouldn't know that.
I mean, it's definitely not a right-wing channel. The one which has done like multiple segments about how they want the NHS to be turned private, when by getting people from the Institute of Economic Affairs and people like Darren Grimes on, people with vested interests. In ensuring that they continue to be having a right-leaning political slant on the channel, whilst also being funded by a hedge fund boss who also has shares in private healthcare companies. That's a bit weird, don't you think it is? I wonder why they have such a right-wing hue, especially on economic issues, right? Like, obviously they're very reactionary as well on a kind of social scale or whatever, if you want to talk about this in kind of political compass terminology. But even if you're just looking from an economic perspective, they're incredibly right-wing. The fact that, there's people on the channel who just say the real enemy is the Labour Party, like, at what point then do you say, well, hang on, if like, obviously the Labour Party are still right-wing, but if you're to the right of the Labour Party where it is now under Starmer, then, how can you claim to be anything other than a right-wing channel? Like, maybe you are a quote-unquote free speech channel because you'll platform people that people don't want to listen to. Sure, maybe you can call yourself the quote-unquote free speech channel. Whatever, fill your boots, I don't care. The rest of us, we want quality programming and not just people saying whatever shit comes to their mind, no matter how offensive. But anyway.
If you went on Twitter today, you had all sorts of reactions. This Femi was saying, I used to adore you, John Cleese. Your parody of Hitler was so good, but now you're siding with the far right Ofcom regulated channel.
Absolutely insane. I mean, there is a kind of...
yeah, like, there's been people on the far right who've passed Ofcom regulations. Like, Nick Griffin was on Question Time. Actually, funny story about that, even though he got humiliated on Question Time, the BNP membership still dramatically increased after that programme, showing that it doesn't matter how well you beat people in these debates, they still at least use their platform to get their own additional added platform. Right? Just platform in the first place expands their reach. Unless they had loads of reach to begin with, then you might as well debate them because you want to try and be able to turn people around who've already been exposed. But that's a pretty large digression. Isn't GB News like super right wing? It's like Newsmax vibes. Oh, 100%. I think it's more Fox News than Newsmax because it's more corporate. It's less. I mean, it's quite conspiratorial though, because they've had like anti-vaxxers on the show and shit like that. They've always been explicitly kind of anti-lockdown, and they've never really had like Fox is less partisan than GB News is for sure.
Hysteria that won't go away among certain people on Twitter, people like Femi, who have bought into this myth that GB News is this far-right thing, and it just isn't true.
And they've never watched it.
No.
They're regulated by Ofcom. We try and be very...
Okay, well, I've watched plenty of it because I've reacted to it on this channel. Yes, it is far-right. I mean, maybe it's right-wing in general. Let's say, like, there's definitely some far-right collaboration. They give away huge numbers of dog whistles to the far-right too. But as a channel, if you're just going to put it on is it left-wing, is it centrist, is it right-wing? Yes, it's definitely 100% right-wing. If you disagree, you're wrong. I mean, that doesn't change the editorial line, though, does it?
It's ridiculous. And people, all sorts of responses. Danielle and Naj said that who cares about John Cleese? She's never watched GB and doesn't intend to, and she felt we should all know that. And I love this response. Someone had said, such a fantastic company. That's the level you've chosen for yourself. So I responded by saying, yeah, we've got Andrew Doyle, satirical genius author. We've got David Starkey, greatest living historian. Peter Hitchens.
David Starkey, greatest living historian. I'm sorry, have you mistaken him for Jacob Bronowski? Like, the guy who was on Newsnight saying how the whites have become... About that, I am now back. The people lost their absolute shit over this segment. People really got very angry in the comments. He won't flop, as you put it. The man's a comedy legend and an intellect. He's got my vote right away. But you're entitled to your opinion. Everybody is. Although apparently no one else seems to think him apparently welcome to our opinion, because people seem to be very angry about the fact that I've dared to criticise their parasocial daddy, which is quite funny. You should watch more GB News. You might learn something. I've watched loads, learnt nothing, thank you. I've learnt how incredibly right-wing the UK media sphere is, at the very least. We have GB News because mainstream news readers attach their emotions to the news. They shouldn't do that. Just report the news and leave it at that. I also need to be told who my heroes and villains are, and that's no one's job. Let me as an adult make up my own mind. Did I tell you that you couldn't have your own mind? This is the whole point of this. Is that the segment is my opinion. My most hated right-wing hypocrisy is that the idea that are for free speech. They say nothing when protest rights go. The anti-capitalist side is abandoned education. Then the full brigade comes out when someone harasses a minority on a private platform and gets a modicum of criticism. We 100%. I'd say, like, you're absolutely right that it's incredibly hypocritical of them. Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, then again, also, I think the issue is that free speech just doesn't really exist, right? Everyone believes there should be limits on free speech. The difference is that we all have different ideas about where that barrier should be, right? It's a low-keys wager where we all have different ideas of understanding of where free speech stops and where hate speech or where unacceptable speech starts, right? You can't, we'll talk about yelling fire in a crowded theatre, all that shit, right? We all agree that there should be some limits on it. But again, the definition that I work with is the real one, which free speech is whatever, when the government stops you saying things that are critical of the government, especially, or when the government clamps down on you for doing or saying certain things. So, for example, like when Count Dankula got fined by the police for doing the Nazi pug salute, I thought that was ridiculous, and quite rightly so.
Give my son a BB gun, and that's just about all the emotional support he needs.
Yeah, I also hate my kids. Maybe this is simply some good, old-fashioned, self-depreciating humour. Even a humorless loser like me occasionally enjoys a bit of self-ridicule. But the more I watched of What is a Woman, the more it became evident that Matt Walsh, being a little bit intellectually challenged, is actually pretty essential for the film to work. See, as we discussed earlier, the idea that Walsh is out on some genuine fact-finding mission is a complete facade. The real premise of this first portion of the film is the left is crazy and no one is able to say what a woman is anymore. The problem for Walsh and the production team is that many of his interviewees actually do provide fairly decent answers to that question. Take Marcy Bauer's response, for instance.
A woman is it's a combination of your physical attributes and then what you're showing to the world and the gender clues that you give. And hopefully those match your gender identity.
Now, not everyone will agree with this definition, but for the film to work, Walsh can't just disagree with the definition that someone provides. That definition needs to be absolutely nonsensical. Whenever he's given any answer to his question, which accepts that gender might be a tiny bit more complicated than just woman equals vagina, then Walsh has to act like a complete simpleton, as though his brain just can't compute anything beyond a very basic level of reasoning.
I mean, how's that different from normal, Tom?
The most ridiculous example of this happens slightly later in the film, after Walsh asks gender studies professor Patrick Rosanka to help him understand the difference between sex and gender. This starts off normal enough.
What we tend to think about in the social sciences today is that sex refers to a set of biological characteristics and gender is a social construct or category.
But then a piece of classical music starts to fade in, and the film begins to skip parts of Grisanka's answer, as if to imply that it's really long and pretentious. Which has the secondary effect of making it look like Walsh's brain just melts the instant that he hears a word longer than 2 syllables. You think you can explain things to me? Well, checkmate leftists, because I'm an idiot. At the end of the day, there is no answer that any of Walsh's trans-affirming interviewees could give that would suffice. Because, as with Borat, the goal here isn't to genuinely interrogate these interviewees' expertise, but to simply ask them question after question until they say something that sounds a bit silly. And that's before we even get into the fact that, like those in Borat, all of these interviews were secured under false pretenses. There's more than an element of this in the exchanges that we've been looking at from the British media, too. In one interview, we even see a repeat of this pantomime of acting as though any definition of womanhood which acknowledges that cervixes might not be everything is treated.
Well, that's the big issue, is that everyone wants just simple definitions. They say, there'll be an argument on Twitter and someone like, well, can you define what woman is right now? And I'm like, what in 280 characters? No, I can't. It's a lot more than that. Turns out it's a lot more complex than what you think it is.
Treated as though it's beyond the limits of human comprehension.
I think it's because a lot of people listening would say, well, I know what a woman is, it's really straightforward, and then it feels that politicians start to get themselves into rabbit holes about this.
The added awfulness here is that, where Walsh at least has the decency to play the idiot himself, the UK equivalent typically involves affluent, privately educated nepotism babies like Stig Abel here, suggesting that it's their audience who is too thick to understand what's
that's just such an excellent description of him.
Going on. Way to pay back the fans, Stig. Crucially, even when politicians have leaned towards the kinds of trans-exclusionary responses that it seems that these journalists are looking
Yeah, but nuances for cucks and for Marxists.
For, that hasn't been enough.
True, woman is when you make gamers upset. Very true. It's the political gender.
Either. After being asked several times for her definition of woman, for example, Labour MP Annalise Dodds began to distance herself from support for trans rights. When asked if she agreed with a colleague that women could be born with penises, she gave this jumbled answer.
Well, no, I don't agree with her. Biological females obviously aren't. Of course, there are also trans women who've made a transition in their gender, but sex is not the same as gender.
Did this mealy-mouthed response put the matter to bed? No!
I mean, it's not even that bad a definition. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Like, saying that there's a difference between biological sex and, our understanding of gender. Yeah, sure, 100%. Like, fair play. Like, there is a difference there, and she's clearly made the point that trans women, go through a transition, and that there's a material difference between cis women and trans women. That's not an offensive thing to say. Like, that's not a horrendous answer that she's given.
Oh, of course not. The channel in question still clipped the interview for social media, and further headlines followed about the Labour Party being torn apart by the so-called trans.
Well, like Annalise Dodds is like one of the less bad when it comes to these things, right? She's hardly a tiny anti-Nazi or a Marsha Duckadova.
Trans debate. On one level then, the question, what is a woman, is simply being used as a means of securing a gotcha moment, in which, by pulling the right faces whilst their interviewee responds, a presenter can portray them as being either stupid, disingenuous, or out of touch. You can't get me with your big ideas about gender! For Matt Walsh, this is an attempt to discredit his political opponents. For British journalists, it is partly about trying to push the Labour Party to the right on social issues, but also about presenters wanting to generate some buzz about their respective shows on social media through taking
things we know they don't want both sides unironically, and we won't, because the reason why we know this is because they will never, ever, ever, ever uncritically platform trans people. They will uncritically platform transphobes. They will have transphobes on from GenSpect or We Are Fair Cop or from Transgender Trend or from all of these hate organizations, or from LGB Alliance or whatever, all of these anti-trans organizations. They'll happily uncritically platform. They'll happily interview them on Sky News. They'll happily have these friendly chats with Graham Linehan, right, where they'll might push back slightly, but will refuse to actually take a pro-trans position, right? They'll happily have these people on to be able to spout their worldview. But as soon as a trans person expresses a wish to be able to put their view to on the mainstream media, It has to be a debate. It was like, you can come on Sean Fay, but only if you debate Julie Bindel. You can come on Katie Montgomery, but only if you debate Julie Burchill. And you can come on Paris Lees, but only if you end up debating Kelly Jean K. Minshaw. Like, it's so obvious that they don't want a proper discussion, right? They just want, the only reason they want to have trans people on is so that they can get people so they can make them angry and use it for clickbait content.
Serves in all these interviews, however. And that is the pseudo-philosophical veneer that such a focus on picking apart the meaning of words and concepts gives to the conversation. Suddenly, we're not just doing boring old politics anymore, we're doing metaphysics, baby! It just brings such a refined academic air to the proceedings. Matt Walsh really leans into this during the opening act of his film, and it leads to some incredible voiceover moments.
Truth is, I'm not very good at fishing. But what is truth? Do I have 4 daughters? Do I now have to pay for 4 weddings? Is there a son trapped in my daughter's body? If so, how do I get him out?
Belvoir P with the bits. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. I am indeed great. That is very true. Very true. There's an excellent assertion you have made there, Belvoir P.
Are any of my kids who they claim to be? Who are these people? Who am I?
Seriously, it would be
true, Iron Mage, true. If you're also like Belvoir P and you want to contribute, you can subscribe for $3.99. You can also drop bits like Belvoir P has done as well. That's always appreciated, as that means that Twitch don't take a cut. And you can also become a member on YouTube for just 99p. Or you can type #donate in Twitch chat. Bring up my tip link as well. Nothing is ever expected, but all support is always appreciated.
It would be impossible to write a sketch satirising Matt Walsh, because it would just be word for word this. A similar desire to want to feel like an intellectual no doubt also fuels presenters like Stig Abel and Nick Ferrari and Andrew Marr, all of whom get a chance to roleplay as Plato for 5 minutes. But the most important effect of this philosophical gesturing...
You can also indeed like the YouTube stream. The DJB with the Prime sub, thank you for the subscription. Welcome to the No Justice stream. I hope you're doing well. Support is always appreciated. Speaking of the YouTube stream, I need to find out if there's anyone who's allowed me to do live redirects, because that's a thing you can do on YouTube, and I want to be able to live redirect on YouTube, but no one has me whitelisted for live redirects.
Is the manner in which it allows everyone involved in these debates to pretend that this conversation is primarily about abstract ideas. We're just discussing definitions here, guys. When, in reality, that's far from the case. See, as is evident in the trajectory of Matt Walsh's documentary, the question, what is a woman, is really just a stand-in for do be extended to trans people, what healthcare they should have access to, and whether they should be able to live free from harassment. While the motivations may be slightly less clear, this is equally true of the interviews that we've been looking at from the British media. Journalists don't make a habit out of asking high-ranking politicians abstract philosophical questions. Louise provide will be indicative of how they might vote on legislation relating to trans rights. The question, what is a woman, is thus a way to push politicians to commit to supporting or opposing trans rights without...
JDM3 has received the gift sub from Belvoir P. Thank you very much again for the further support, and always good to have JDM in chat as well. But a YouTube member, I believe, as well as being a Twitch sub now, thanks to the gift from Belvoir. Thank you very much for the support. Again, always appreciated. You now get access to the excellent emotes, including the pork markets emote, which my chat will show you. Chat, put the pork markets emote. It's the best one.
You know, coming across as too divisive. Of course, there are elements of the British media that are more than happy to engage in very direct, open fear-mongering about trans people. However, that kind of journalism only really works among a certain crowd. More mainstream audiences will often be turned off by rhetoric which comes across as too outwardly hateful. The team which produced What is a Woman seems very aware of this. There's a reason that the first 25 minutes of the film seem so mild for something produced by the Daily Wire. It needs that time to set Walsh up as a reasonable, respectable journalist. To anyone who's only coming across his work for the first time, this functions to present the hate, which so clearly fuels...
Oh, Sensibilium, are you not aware of the pork markets meme? Oh, classic. Okay, good. Okay, fair enough.
his
You
later
are
stunts as the outcome of the conversations these had during the making of this film, rather than a textbook case of right-wing fear of the other. This isn't to say that I necessarily think that any of these journalists are likely to be giving speeches at turf rallies anytime soon, but it's clear that each of them, and their producers, feel some level of professional jealousy when they see the attention which inflammatory articles about the so-called trans debate attract. This pseudo-philosophical language thus provides an opportunity in the form of a level of plausible deniability. They're able to participate in this controversial debate, or sometimes not even mentioning trans people by name at all. Most British journalists would thus like to think that there is an ocean between themselves and Matt Walsh. Okay, obviously there is a literal ocean between them most of the time, but
just reckon something about trans people, or reckon something about sex and gender. They reckon they have an opinion on it because, you know, whatever, like they feel like they should be able to justify the fact that they are journalists mean that whatever they should be, their opinion must be heard because they're a journalist, so whatever they say must be taken as read. When, you know, what was trans people, our lives are trans, is doing this stuff, right? To be able to justify our own existence, we have to be psychologists and sexologists and endocrinologists and sociologists and psychologists and gender studies majors, and we have to do all of these things simultaneously just to justify our own existence, our own access to our own civil rights. And these journalists don't have to care about any of that. They just have to reckon. And then suddenly they get a seat at the table to discuss the finer points about what happens to my very existence.
those that we've looked at in this video would perhaps stress that their reporting lacks the kind of open hostility towards trans people that defines the output of institutions like the Daily Wire. Yet, just as that more timid opening act of What is a Woman works to legitimise the more openly hateful sequences that follow, so too have these pseudo-intellectual conversations about definitions of womanhood allowed more extreme transphobic formations to emerge into the mainstream. And perhaps those more recent developments provide a means of drawing this video to a close. While the death of old Lizzie has been soaking up the majority of press attention over recent weeks, at time of recording, Britain's transphobic moral panic continues on in earnest. Shortly after I started working on this video, Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister of the UK. This meant that his colleagues in the Conservative Party had to elect a new leader. And as a direct result of seeing the anguish that the so-called trans debate appears to cause the Labour Party, candidates for the position jostled with one another to present themselves as the most opposed to trans rights. Announcing her bid for the party leadership, Suella Braverman gave this moving speech.
We need to get rid of all of this woke rubbish and actually get back to a country where describing a man and a woman in terms of biology does not mean that you're going to lose your job.
Rishi Sunak similarly launched his campaign.
No one's lost their job about that shit. No one's lost their job because they said that men and women were defined by biology. No, none of that's happened. Like, for example, like, remember there was the guy from Ireland, right? The guy who got sent to prison for violating a court order because he continually misgendered his own students, which is part of the actual school's policy, which he violated, right? Like, the court order was to stay away from the school, and then he got arrested and sent to prison for violating that court order. Like, his prison sentence was nothing to do with his stance on trans issues at all, whatsoever. But the media manipulated this to sound like they got sent to prison for the misgendering and not for violating the court order. It's rancid the way these people talk about this shit.
With a manifesto for...
Like, they lied about... like Alison Bailey and Stonewall. They lied about Tavistock. They lied about everything. They lied about the Cass Review interim report.
For women's rights. In truth, little more than a transphobic dog whistle. Another candidate, Penny Mordaunt, had previously been seen as a rare trans ally within the Conservative Party.
Trans men are men, trans women are women.
On putting herself forward for leader, however, she span like a fidget spinner, posting a Twitter thread about how trans women are not biological women and highlighting her record of fighting trans orthodoxy. Last, but by very no means least, we have Kemi Badenoch, who tried to grab headlines by banning gender-neutral toilets from the venue where she hosted her campaign launch. The problem being that the toilets in question were just two self-contained cubicles, so aides had to stick sad, handwritten notes reading men and ladies to the door. Which I feel the need to say, if you're going to do gendered, anything. It's clearly men and women, or ladies and gentlemen. It's not men and ladies. If you're gonna swing around the gender binary like it's a flipping hammer, then at least get your labels right. I don't think
No,
it is.
you get it right. It's men and adult human female dinosaurs. That is the true distinction between the sexes, Tom. But like, it also goes back to like, oh, what about toilets? What about changing rooms? Just have single cubicles everywhere. I don't want to get changed in front of anybody. I don't care what gender they are. I want to get changed on my own. I want to go for a piss on my own. I want to go for a shit on my own. I don't want the cubicle to have loads of air and loads of gaps above and below. Just give me a single cubicle with its own self-contained sink. I hate communal areas. Can we just stop, please?
Overstatement at all to say that this bout of competitive transphobia by potential prime ministers was provoked almost entirely by the sequence of interviews that we've looked at in this video. Whatever claims they might make about being apolitical, whatever defences they might invoke about how they were just asking questions, these journalists' promotion of the idea that questioning the existence of trans people is a legitimate, even intelligent pursuit has very real consequences. It doesn't matter whether or not their intentions might be different from those of Matt Walsh, the results are surprisingly similar. But this pseudo-philosophical riddle me this genre of debate is not only dangerous as a gateway to more openly hostile transphobic politics, it is troubling enough in and of itself, for it is inherently dehumanizing. This whole charade about definitions of womanhood denies trans people their humanity. The hopes, fears, frustrations, and aspirations of actual living, breathing trans people are hidden from view, and this already marginalized community is instead transformed into a philosophical provocation, a linguistic complication. Such a mode of debate obviously makes it much easier for bigotry to grow, because it conceals any traces of character and personality and experience that cis people watching these debates might connect with. All of this will no doubt be more than obvious to any trans people watching. Others will also likely have noticed the manner in which these debates mirror those surrounding other marginalised groups. For any cis people watching, however, I think whenever we find ourselves drawn into these kinds of discussions, it's important not only to make it clear that trans people and lives and rights are not up for debate, but also to re-inject that sense of humanity back into the conversation. Because that sense of shared humanity is the foundation on which real solidarity is built. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it has been worth.
All right, JDM. Like there were on like leftoid like shitposter Twitter, like UK leftist shitposter Twitter, was to post a picture of your face and what music do you think I listen to? And I was like, I could share it, and then but everyone just go, I bet you listen to Sophie and Death Grips, and they'd be half right. I don't really listen to Sophie, but I love Death Grips. And it's like every single trans woman has. There is that. I will tell you the real delineation, right? The real Blanchard typology. On one side, you have Sophie, you have Death Grips, and you have Meshuggah, and you have Kendrick Lamar. And on the other side, you have Taylor Swift, you have Charlie XCX, and you have and you have all of that lot, right? That's the real Blanchard typology between AGPs and HSTS. Right. I did watch the Sean video, yeah. And to be fair, it's a lot of stuff that I'm already just super well aware of because I've just spent my entire life in like, having to deal with this shit. And also, I follow Casey Montgomery on Twitter, and she will tweet about these people forever. I mean, it's usually the AGP is the weird music, and HSTS is the dance music. That's the delineation. I mean, it's a contentious issue, right, JDM? Like, it's obviously frustrating that it's being cancelled, but again, if you're Warwick Uni, right, and you don't want a bunch of people in dinosaur costumes to show up and protest, then you're not going to want to have Katie come and talk. Like, it's frustrating, I get it, but, you know, these institutions want to make sure they they get left well alone, and you know, I can't blame them. Yeah, I'm just gonna like. Apparently, there was a big Tisky Sour where they've talked about the political stuff from today. So I'm just gonna watch some Nivara because I've run out of content that I wanted to get through, but I don't feel like ending the stream because people are having fun and I'm enjoying chatting with chat. So, any positives I can draw from what, Belfast? Sorry.
And you'll be Chancellor, and Liz Truss will be Prime Minister this time next month.
Absolutely.
If we're going to talk latest Sean Ryder moment of all time, let me. It's coming off!
Never did no out, never did no out, never did no out. It's there. Coming up, screaming up, yes.
Is there any positives about general people willing to learn, to understand the trans issues? I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, it feels like the trans debate has been, if it was at least it was somewhat, at least if it was being at least somewhat kind of even-handed, then maybe there'd be some positives, right? But it's the media kind of like sphere around it is so entirely populated by transphobes and people who genuinely want to see us removed from public life. Like, I find very difficult to draw any positives, unfortunately, as much as I wish I could.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm not going anywhere.
Oops. That was Kwasi Kwarteng yesterday in Washington. He is now out of a job. And the question now on everyone's lips is Liz Truss going to follow him? How secure is she in her job as Prime Minister? I'm joined on what is a remarkable day in British politics by Aaron Bastani. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Michael. Very happy to be joining you. You know, we were very close to not doing this evening show for a few reasons. But my God, Michael, thank goodness we have the master of ceremonies in the house, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting day. It's going to be an exciting show. We do want to know your comments and your questions. How long do you give Liz Truss? Will she last longer than it takes for a lettuce to go mouldy? That is another question on the lips of the nation. I think the Daily Star are putting a live feed showing a lettuce. So we're going to see that go mouldy live over the next 7 days. That's apparently how long they last. And we've got to see if Liz Truss lasts any longer. It was at around midday today that we had confirmation that Kwasi Kwarteng had been fired as Britain's Chancellor. And it was then left to Liz Truss to perform the mother of all U-turns in a high-profile Downing Street address. The speech was only 4 minutes long. We'll take you through it.
Good afternoon. My conviction that this country needs to go for growth is rooted in my personal experience. I know what it's like to grow up somewhere that isn't feeling the benefits of growth. I saw what that meant, and I'm not prepared to accept that for our country. I want a country where people can get good jobs, new businesses can set up, and families can afford an even better life. That's why, from day one, I've been ambitious for growth. Since the 2008 financial crisis, the potential of this great country has been held back by persistently weak growth.
That clearly wasn't the most important part of her speech. We will get onto that. The reason I wanted to stop there is because I do just find it endlessly hilarious that Liz Truss's origin story for her whole political project, her purpose in life, is how terrible, because she's learned how terrible the economy was in the 1980s and how terrible it was in the 2010s, and she wants to change it. Well, if what shaped your politics is thinking that the economy sucked in the 1980s and in the 2010s, you don't need a new chancellor. You need to start voting Labour. They're the last 2 decades where the whole 10
years. the start of neoliberalism in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher, and then the re-emergence of austerity under the coalition government. And then you want to push austerity and neoliberalism onto everyone even further. What?
Years we had Tories in government. Completely bizarre. As I said there, the meat of the speech is coming up. Let's go back to that.
I want to deliver a low-tax, high-wage, high-growth economy. It's what I was elected by my party to do. That mission remains. People across this country rightly want stability. That's why we acted to support businesses and households with their energy costs this winter. It's also the case that global economic conditions are worsening due to the continuation of Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. And on top of this, debt was amassed helping people through the COVID pandemic. But it is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are delivering our mission right now has to change. We need to act now to reassure the markets of our fiscal discipline. I have therefore decided to keep the increase in corporate...
Just blame Putin. It's all Putin's fault. Nasty Putin and his desire to attack UK government bond yields.
...tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year.
They've got fewer flags in their public address room than the Labour Party had on their stage at their conference, clearly being one-upped by the patriotic Labour Party.
It will act as a down payment on our full medium-term fiscal plan, which will be accompanied by a forecast from the independent OBR.
Now, by yesterday lunchtime, before that speech, people had been suspecting that U-turn was coming, but it cannot be overstated just how humiliating it was. Liz Truss's entire leadership campaign, her campaign to become Tory leader, was based on opposition to Rishi Sunak's tax rises. That was her raison d'etre. The reason people should elect Liz Truss, leader of the Conservative Party, is because Rishi Sunak was making Britain into a high tax economy and he was going to push it into a recession. Liz Truss was going to do something different. Now, she's been forced to accept that the biggest one of his tax rises has to go ahead.
We will do whatever is necessary to ensure debt is falling as a share of the economy in the medium term. We will control the size of the state to ensure that taxpayers' money is always well spent. Our public sector will become more efficient to deliver world-class services for the British people. And spending will grow less rapidly than previously planned.
And that was potentially the most important part of the speech. The U-turn on corporation tax and the top rate of income tax still leaves £20 billion of unfunded tax cuts. And as you heard there, Truss wants to fund that with austerity 2.0. Now, I'm going to stop interrupting this historic speech from Liz Truss. You can watch the rest of it now.
I met the former Chancellor earlier today. I was incredibly sorry to lose him. He is a great friend, and he shares my vision to set this country...
The only reason, again, like I said, the only reason she got rid of him was to save her own skin.
...on the path to growth. Today, I have asked Jeremy Hunt to become the new Chancellor. He's one of the most experienced and widely respected government ministers and parliamentarians, and he shares my convictions and ambitions for our country. He will deliver the medium-term fiscal plan at the end of this month. He will see through the support we are providing to help families and businesses, including our energy price guarantee that's protecting people from higher energy bills this winter. And he will drive our mission to go for growth, including taking forward the supply-side reforms that our country needs. We owe it...
Jeremy! We now get to reference Mark from Peep Show in political context again. There's now a frontline Jeremy in politics. Jeremy!
...to the next generation to improve our economic performance, to deliver higher wages, new jobs and better public services, and to ease the burden of debt. I have acted decisively today because my priority is ensuring our country's economic stability. As Prime Minister, I will always act in the national interest. This is always my first consideration. I want to be honest, this is difficult, but we will get through this storm and we will deliver the strong and sustained growth that can transform the prosperity of our country for generations to come.
Is there anyone in Britain who believes that acting in the national interest is what really motivates Liz Truss? Now, she promised all of these, the reason we have this market chaos is not because of anything quasi-Kwarteng pushed on this government. It's because Liz Truss, in her leadership campaign, explicitly promised that all of these tax cuts would go ahead. Now, she's had to U-turn on that. She's blaming her Chancellor, throwing him under the bus. But it made her Prime Minister. She probably doesn't regret, promising all of those tax cuts because that's how she became Prime Minister. And now she's going to, hope to hang on even after sending everyone's mortgage rates rising. Now, you have now seen the whole of Liz Truss's 4-minute speech. It was followed by 4 minutes of questions and answers. We'll go to those in one moment. First, though, Aaron, I want your take on that speech. I mean, how humiliating was it? I mean, watching it, it was quite something.
famous spiked online contributor Aaron Bastani here. It's so embarrassing. He was gonna speak at the Spiked Online live show. It's incredibly embarrassing, but he pulled out. His dad's pretty ill, which is sad. So get well soon, Aaron's dad.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive and pretty extraordinary. I mean, we'll talk about this over the course of the show, Michael. I don't know if this is the end of it personally, because of course, when somebody is so richly humiliated in public, you think, well, this is the low point. This is the nadir. I don't think it is, because actually the rowback they made today wasn't that big, and I think there was almost a show of eating humble pie and the sacking of Kwasi Kwarteng and will he, won't he overnight, and then this morning, and then he goes, and that's the media spectacle. But actually, you look at substantively what's changed in regards to the mini budget, and we still have extraordinarily high unfunded tax cuts. So yes, it was humiliating for Liz Truss, but I think that's part of the ploy here, is maximal humiliation, keep on saying U-turn, even though substantively the U-turn isn't that big. We've still got the tax cuts in regard to national insurance contributions and in regard to the top rate of in regards rather to the basic rate. So of those £45 billion worth of tax cuts, you've still got about half of them. I personally don't think that in the medium term that will be enough to pacify the markets. I may be wrong. Let's see.
Strange situation now where, we wouldn't normally celebrate the markets disciplining. I mean, was she a democratically elected prime minister? Not by the public, but, the constitutional way that our system works. She is the prime minister of a democratic system, and her policy now seems to be being dictated by international markets. That's not a good thing. But I suppose we've been willing to tolerate it while their issues have been with tax cuts. Completely bizarre policies to benefit the rich, which would also increase inflation and so be difficult for the rest of us. It seems now we might be moving into a situation where what the markets want, she's dumped half of her tax cuts now. From that speech you heard, it seems like we're about to get £20 billion of public spending cuts. Now, that would be disastrous. It would be awful. There is some discussion that it's going to be hard for her to get that through Parliament. But then again, I mean, do we really have that much confidence that Conservative backbench MPs are not going to allow £20 billion in spending cuts to go through? I mean, they've done worse in recent memory, haven't they? So I don't have too much faith that they're going to stand in the way of the decimation of public services in defence of the rest of Liz Truss's tax cuts and to please the markets, especially with Jeremy Hunt, who's very much an establishment figure in post. We'll talk about him more later. Now, though, let's go to the question answers session. Liz Truss controversially only took 4 questions, and as I say, the whole thing lasted just 4 minutes. We're going to show you the whole thing.
Can you explain to the public why you think you should remain as Prime Minister, given you jumped a key tax cut that led you to be elected and got rid of your Chancellor?
There we go.
Making sure that our country is on the long-term footing for sustainable economic growth. Thank you very much, everybody.
Prime Minister, are you going to say sorry?
That was Liz Truss delivering a speech and answers which were supposed to inspire confidence in her government. I don't think it worked, and that performance didn't do much to restore confidence among her MPs. Pippa Carrar from The Guardian tweeted this. Tory MPs already texting to say they think that Liz Truss's press conferences actually to the government. That fell last night with news of an expected policy U-turn, so it's good news if it falls. But when Kwarteng was sacked and Liz Truss gave that speech, they rose again. In terms of sterling, so we always hear about the pound. The FT were confidence-inspiring address. The pound was falling. Aaron, obviously, it wasn't an easy speech for anyone to give. I think it had low expectations, but I think even though she didn't meet, and I suppose one thing also I want to mention, you sort of said what they've got to do at this point is put her out and humiliate her. What lots of people have been saying is what you're supposed to do as a prime minister, if you're has got people thinking that she is,
Some J.K. Rowling acolytes sent a dox and bomb threats to Tiled Alien Library mascot fan account. Very normal country. The Tal of the Alien stuff that really knocked me for 6. So I'm glad Maya Forstatus had her account deleted on Twitter. Literally having her own Jordan Peterson moment where she has to delete the offending tweet, right? Or she won't have access to her account again. So she goes, well, I deny that my tweet, I refuse to delete my tweet that apparently violated the Twitter rules. Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who. She's having a Jordan Peterson moment, right, where she refuses to delete the tweet. The tweet was leaking someone's fucking nudes. She was doing revenge porn on the timeline, and obviously Twitter shut that shit down, and she refuses to delete. She's the transfers are fucking, they're ill. Like Francis Barber was praising Steve Bannon because he was better for being better than Owen Jones, and Billy Bragg on trans rights. Like, these transphobes are not well. They're just not well. Definitely a John Cleese moment, yeah. definitely want the Tala library card, 100%. I mean, I covered a good segment where John Cleese just terminated an interview because he was being asked questions he didn't like. So yeah, it's very much a John Cleese moment.
She's not willing to absorb all the flack and show that she can sort of deflect things in the way that sort of Boris Johnson could. What do you make of that?
Well, I just, I think it was Krishna Gurumurthy from Channel 4, I could be wrong, who said, aren't you going to say sorry? And I just think, like, who cares if she says sorry? I just find this so pathetic. And also, you're a journalist, I don't know. I find it really pathetic, Michael. I find it really, really pathetic. Nobody cares if she says sorry. They don't want their mortgages to go up. They would like inflation to be dealt with.
Well, yeah, there was a very telling tweet by J.K. Rowling today where she was like, "Oh, I don't really care about the fact that people dislike me because I'm really rich." I was like, that's worse. You do get that that's worse, right? But it's now not about whether or not you feel like you have a genuine moral crusade. It's just how I'm rich, I can do what I want. Fuck you all. A slight delay,
and they want interest rates to stay low, and they don't want their pension funds to collapse. So will you say sorry? It really just annoys me. Nobody cares about Liz Truss. Nobody cares about the drama. They just don't want their personal lives to be screwed up. I would also say that the emphasis on her performance, well, that didn't calm the markets. No, the markets are worried because the fundamentals haven't actually changed that much. We had 48 to 50 billion pounds worth of uncosted.
Belvoir with another gifted sub. Thank you very much for the continued support. Welcome to the Justice Stream, Fotsy Lotsy.
Tax cuts. This was the biggest, Michael. This wasn't a budget. And yet we had the biggest tax giveaway in 50 years. And it wasn't even a budget. I mean, the further away we get from the events of the mini budget, the more insane they look. 50 billion pounds worth of tax cuts. More than any budget, this wasn't even a budget, under Margaret Thatcher. And she did it within weeks of coming in to 10 Downing Street without a general election. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. But the big thing is, Michael, that yes, there were 4 big tax cuts in there. Higher rate, which was only, by the way, that was only going to cost the Exchequer about £2 billion. They got obviously rid of the highest rate of tax. Reducing the basic rate from 20p to 19p. That's still there. I think that costs about 16 billion. Corporation tax cuts, they've gotten rid of those. They're now going to go up to 25%. They're presently at 19%, I think. You're on top of that better than I am. That's not going to happen now. So they are going to go up to 25%. But the national insurance tax cuts are also staying. So 2 of those 4 tax cuts are staying. The national insurance contribution tax cut, I think, again, is about 15, 16 billion. So you are looking at, like I say, a package which was completely unfunded. I think even through to 26, 27, as in 2026, 2027, 5 years' time, 4 or 5 years' time, just these tax cuts, I think basically you'd be looking at Britain running a deficit of like 4 or 5%. And obviously that's on top of a public debt, which is already quite sizable. Not that these things matter, because the one thing the Tories say, which is true, we have a lower public debt than almost anyone else in the G7, even the G20. It's about, 90-95%, depends who you ask, what day. But we're certainly not Japan or Italy or France. Or the USA. That's true. The national debt isn't that big a thing. But this idea that within 3 weeks, you do the biggest tax cuts a country has seen in 50 years.
Like, I deliberately set my Streamlabs chat alerts and prompts and things so that it didn't happen at the same time. And now they just happen. Like, I did like a 15-minute delay between the two. And now they're just happening at the same time for some reason.
Having not won a general election, I think most people go, the people running that country aren't quite sensible or even politically sane. We should probably get out. Looking at the big fundamentals, which are affecting every country worldwide over the next 6, 12, 18 months, high interest rates, global recession/depression, political volatility. People are going to get very upset in many, many, many countries, global north and south. If you've got people like that running the UK, probably best not to be holding pounds, probably not best to be holding government debt, probably not best to be doing lots of things, certainly foreign direct investment, whatnot. Why bother? These people aren't serious people. So I think that is why the markets weren't particularly persuaded by the events of the last, 12 hours. The sacking of Kwarteng, the speech, the U-turns. I don't think it's because Truss isn't a credible operator or Truss is useless. Oh my God, her Q&A. That certainly doesn't help. Why the markets haven't changed that much is actually they haven't really done a full U-turn. When they said they were going to go back on the mini budget, Michael, I genuinely thought, and I thought they were going to have to do that. That was obvious about a week ago. I thought that would entail, of these 4 tax cuts, all of them being rolled back.
Yeah, it's like everyone's saying, oh, well, he likes the CCP because of lockdowns. This is literally communist China. And I'm like, yeah, the guy who gets appointed as a chancellor who wrote a book about dismantling the NHS. Is this communism?
They've only gone back on 2. And so I do actually think this problem could re-emerge again in 2, 3, 4 weeks. I do. Because actually they've not acted decisively enough to calm market sentiment. And when you get the animal spirits in the market, and you get volatility and uncertainty, the one thing you have to do is be decisive. That idea of shock and awe with regards to market failure after 2008, massive intervention to calm things down. Or like with the Bank of England very recently in regards to saving pension funds in this country, who were really exposed to what's going on with British gilts. Massive intervention, calm things down. The big bazooka, as it was called in 2008. I think when you've only reversed 2 of 4 highly controversial tax cuts, which are unfunded, I think the story isn't going away.
We're going to talk about, Keir Starmer asking for a general election one moment. Before we do, though, I want to talk about what I think is quite a fundamental issue. I think Jeremy Gilbert tweeted today that we're seeing two things today, which is one, the end of neoliberalism as a guiding project of sort of political policy making, but at the same time, confirmation that the market, politically costly for Liz Truss to do, she gave them no choice, because I think there's going to have to be a political U-turn, and the combination of the Bank, I think it was
the idea that you've got, progressives going, oh yeah, the bond markets, oh, the IMF, obviously ridiculous, right? Absurd. And you could foresee a situation like you have with President Mitterrand in France in the early 1980s. That was the last time a European government got monstered by the markets when they tried to pursue a certain policy direction. The difference is, Michael, Mitterrand was elected. He had democratic legitimacy behind his program, his agenda. He had buy-in from a bunch of other political parties, not just his own Socialist Party. With Liz Truss, you have somebody who's been chosen by tens of thousands of Tory party members, doesn't even command the majority support amongst her own MPs. And like I say, Michael, within 3 weeks, they did the biggest set of tax cuts in 50 years. Bigger than any budget under Thatcher. And this wasn't even a budget. And there was no OBR. I don't like the OBR, but if you're going to do that, you need to play the game, right? So I do actually think...
There's even John McDonnell had cleared a bunch of the Labour policy proposals before he was even elected with the OBR, right? So they had proper clearance for the policy platform that he was going to espouse. And Liz Truss, the person who's supposed to be the economic radical, someone who won't do it, it's crazy.
There's a part of me that even if I was on the right and I liked Liz Truss and I was an IEA fanboy, I would probably say, why did you do that? Why did you rush all of that? Politically, it doesn't make any sense. It's like a socialist coming. Imagine if there's a Labour government. Keir Starmer, and let's say he's not totally awful, but he's not great either. And he's, quite melty, but we see rail going to public ownership. We see a little bit of council house building. We see the national minimum wage sort of edge up a little bit. He's bad on other stuff. A John McDonnell clone. Without his political savvy, because John McDonnell will never do this. And then within the first several weeks of them coming into office, they say, right, that's it. We're going to take 4 or 5 different industries into public ownership. We're going to double the national minimum wage, and we're going to have a top rep tax of 99%. Now, you might think they're all good policies. I think actually a lot of that is very good policy. But the point is, I wouldn't endorse that politically because I think it would probably be quite inastute. It would probably not be in your national self-interest. You would get smashed by political forces beyond your control very quickly. And politics is about that, right? Politics is about what you can do within a certain set of conditions. It's about necessity. This is the end of neoliberalism. When you've got the market saying, because actually what the best thing to do here wasn't just to roll back on all of the mini budget. Like I said, they've rolled back on 2 of the 4 tax cuts.
I feel sorry for Liz's husband, who's going to have to deal with her being awake literally all night for the next 3 weeks.
They should have rolled back on all 4 of them. And actually, if they really wanted to pacify markets, they should have said corporation tax will go to 27%, not 25%. Actually increase the tax take more than what Rishi Sunak was pledging. I think that would have then pacified quite a lot of sentiment. And you might think, well, why are markets calling for more taxes? Well, the reality is Britain has to service its debt. It hasn't got a growing economy, and the idea that you do deficit-funded tax.
I mean, it's definitely the end. It's definitely the end of austerity, right? If anything that if we can take anything from the public reaction to Liz Truss, is that people are signalling that they do not like or do not want austerity, right? It's clearly a brand that's been toxified by what's happened just now, by what's happened in the last few weeks. It's very, very clear to me that when people get the understanding that bankers' bonuses are being risen to pay for cuts to the public services that they use, they get frustrated. People don't like austerity anymore. And it's just clear with the platform that Boris Johnson ran on, but he was not an anti-austerity candidate, but not a pro-austerity candidate either. He was happy, levelling up is not an austerity agenda that Boris Johnson was running on. So it's clear that people don't like that. And it's clear that Boris Johnson tapped into a national sentiment by moving away from austerity politics. So Liz Truss then immediately taking it up as taking the mantle of austerity with her, and the public roundly rejected it. And also the public like government intervention. There's a supermajority in favour of renationalisation when you look at every single poll on the subject. The British public don't like that shit. And they don't really want it. They just get scared into voting Conservative because of, or at least they did in 2019, but over Brexit issues and because of Jeremy Corbyn being the terrorist synthesizer.
Tax cuts when you're a net importer of energy, food, your industrial base is minimal, and you've seen zero growth for about 14 years per capita, more or less zero growth. People would just think, what the hell are you doing? It's like a 55-year-old having a 20 pack of cigarettes, a pack of pie, 4 pints of lager, and thinking they can mix it with, the creme de la creme of the Premier League. No, you're going to get found out. That's not your level. Yes, Reagan's America could do that in the 80s. Truss's Britain in 2022 cannot. And actually, that is for me the real lesson here, is that what you saw with Rees-Mogg and Britannia Unchained and all these people, and it fits into the idea of Brexit, was that Britain was effectively the Britain of the 19th century. We can champion and advocate free trade and free markets just like this country did in the 19th century. The only difference is, of course, you don't have an empire covering 1/4 of the planet's surface, the world's most powerful army. You don't have the fact that London was the central hub of global finance. We were effectively the Saudi Arabia of energy because, of course, we had coal. We were this manufacturing powerhouse. So we were effectively Saudi Arabia, China, and New York all in one country. Britain isn't that country anymore. You might like Britain. You might think it's a great place to live. It ain't that country anymore. But in the minds of Jacob Rees-Mogg and a lot of the people around Liz Truss, it was. And I think that is the reality they've smashed up against in the last 2-3 weeks.
This was Keir Starmer's take on Kwarteng's sacking. So it's an interview in The Guardian, and he said, change in personnel at the top of the Tory party is not the change we need. We need a change of government. We are in the absurd situation where we are on the
We need a fresh start.
fourth Prime Minister in 6
Clearly, the Conservatives have come down from the moon, where they've apparently been for the past 3 weeks.
years, and within weeks, we have got a Prime Minister who has the worst reputational ratings of any Prime Minister in history. Their party is completely exhausted and clapped out. It has got no ideas, it can't face the future, and it has left the UK in a defensive crouch where we are not facing the challenges of the future because we haven't got a government that could lead us to the future. For the good of the country, we need a general election. Aaron, Keir Starmer calling for a general election. I don't know if you think that's a smart idea or not. I suppose the more interesting question is there any mechanism by which we would get one?
Any sensible Tory clearly is not going to vote for a general election right now, because I think, yes, Liz Truss can fall further. I do think there's a sort of cognitive bias. We'll say, oh, well, this is the lowest point. Why? Why is it the lowest point? If you're getting 20% in the opinion polls a month after coming to office, who knows? We've never seen this before. Maybe they can go to 10%. Right? I mean, this already seems outlandish to me. So I don't really subscribe to that thinking. However, I don't think the Tories would go into a general election with this kind of polling. Surely they've got 2 years to not do that. Surely they've got two options here. One is to stick with Truss, and basically she's sort of puppeteered by the 1922 committee and doesn't do anything. They probably would recover 5-10%. They might get 30% in a general election. But
Yeah, I know, right? Fixed Term Parliament Act would have been got the election next year rather than 2 years' time.
I don't see how. They might do. Or they, and I think this is what they will do, they'll let things calm down for the next couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, and then replace her once the market is calmed. By the way, it might not be like I say, because they've not actually done a proper U-turn on the mini-budget. So the only way we can have a general election is if Conservative MPs agree to a general election. They aren't going to do that. So I don't really see Keir Starmer's one. Unless, of course, King Charles, my apologies, King Charles, the woke, unless he says he no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister, plausible, it'd be a constitutional crisis. But you could see a certain set of circumstances where that becomes...
It's possible even that Liz Truss hasn't even ridden back on some of these policy prescriptions from the mini-budget. She probably hasn't even ridden back on them because of the effects of the market. She's probably mostly ridden back on them just because she knows that her budget will fail if she tries to put it through the Parliament. And then she'll trigger a constitutional crisis, right? I think that's really what she cares about, not whether or not she believes that it's good for the economy or not.
The case. Maybe people from her own party come to him and say that, then maybe. I mean, there was a similar situation to that with Chamberlain, obviously, in 1940. Maybe you might get a sort of coalition government. I don't know. There's a lot of eventual, sort of contingencies, and eventually most of them, they'd be reduced to around 100 seats right now. So hard to envisage.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see it happening, unless there's some sort of kamikaze thing with sort of 40 Tory MPs who decide they completely want to destroy the Conservative Party for some reason. It does seem hard to imagine. Let's move on. We're now going to talk about the people who do have it within their power, whether or not a general election happens or whether or not Liz Truss is replaced. Liz Truss's disastrous press conference has led not so much to rumblings as roarings from within the ranks of Tory MPs. Things are not looking good for the beleaguered Prime Minister. Shortly after the press conference, journalists on the Westminster beat quickly began posting those cries of despair on Twitter. This is from The Sun's Harry Cole. This is from an MP that supported Truss. An embarrassingly robotic performance. I'm not sure the parliamentary party or markets will be reassured or convinced by her single automaton Tory MP who actually supported Truss' leadership campaign. And in quotes, she's a goner, I'm afraid. And then there's a screenshot of someone saying awful on WhatsApp with a sad face. But the obvious worry for the Tories is that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, they could get rid of Truss and risk facing a general election which would destroy them. On the other, they could keep Liz Truss and watch the markets continue to spin out of control and their poll ratings plummet. Former Chancellor Philip Hammond turned up to discuss the problem on the BBC's World at 1, and he was asked, can Truss survive?
I think she can survive.
I wonder what it would take for King Charles literally to come down if they try and remove Truss and have another leadership election and just go through go through it again. We have to go through the whole fucking process again. I wonder what it gets to the point where King Charles just goes, no, dissolving Parliament, you fucked it. Let's go again. Right? I wonder what would happen. What would it take to get to that point? For him to intervene Whitlam style? Sleep well, St. William.
And the logic of that is simply that I personally do not believe that the country will tolerate another change of leader without a general election. And I do not believe that Conservative MPs, who are the only group who can remove the Prime Minister, are minded to have a general election anytime soon. So I think, much as they may be disillusioned with her, I don't think they can remove her without risking an early general election.
So the Tories would rather deal with Truss one way or another than face the public. And that was a sentiment that keen Truss supporter John Redwood expressed too.
Because we've just had a big contest about that. A number of very talented people put their names forward. We all had our opportunity to support, argue, and cross-examine. And the final vote was very clearly in favour of Liz Truss. And also remember that by that, need to remember we did that and give every support and some good advice to the Prime Minister, because she's clearly going to need it to get from where she is today to a winning economic policy as soon as possible, which can restore confidence.
But not everyone who was behind Truss still has her back. Before the press conference, Tory MP Sir Christopher Chope appeared on Newsnight. He was asked how he would feel if Liz Truss were to U-turn on corporation tax. Here's what he said.
She's not going to, and I would feel that this was...
Oh yeah, Mr. Upskirt. We definitely want to hear his opinion, don't we, folks?
A complete betrayal of all that she believes in. Liz Truss is a calm, considered, very clever, intelligent person, and she's not going to pursue a policy which was totally inconsistent with her policy of promoting growth. And one way of promoting growth is by keeping corporation tax low.
Sure. Calm considered.
Which is not true, though. Like, you incentivize growth by increasing corporation tax.
Very intelligent, clever person. Less than 24 hours later, Chope appeared on Times Radio with a rather different opinion.
What do you think about the kind of job that Liz Truss has made over the last month and a bit?
Well, I voted for Liz Truss because I supported her policies. And I still support what her policies are meant to be, but she hasn't delivered on them.
Right, so do you still retain confidence?
I don't know where to go from here, frankly, and I think that a lot of real Conservatives will be in exactly the same dilemma. What do we do now? Because basically the Conservatives...
It's really strange how there's been this kind of political sea change where now, unless you're like a dyed-in-the-wool, like libertarian Rothbardian type, objectivist or whatever, like, they don't count you as being conservative. Like, ran huge like tax cutting measures. Now that's real conservatism. Like leaving a massive gaping hole in the public finances. Is that really conservatism, or is it actually just been the Conservative Party since 1979? A lot of old school Tories actually are more cultural conservatives, and they believe in the Macmillan style form of governance. They don't want this libertarian, hard right, no state style governance. They really don't.
The economic agenda seems to have been trashed.
Right, would you like to see her replaced then?
I think that's an irrelevance, frankly.
Really? She's the one driving this ship into the
damage has already been done. When I regret that I've, in a sense, been proved right. And what is happening now is that we are seeing sort of a Conservative parliamentary party out of control. The hyenas are on the hunt. And I'm therefore very pessimistic about how we're going to be able to...
Yeah, it's like all of the quote unquote rhinos, they all love like tax cuts for the rich. They all have exactly the same economic precepts. They're just slightly different on foreign policy and Muslims. Like at least outwardly as far as policy is concerned. They don't like Muslim bans or whatever. Like why is it, this crazy realignment which people think is natural, which really isn't? Like Nigel Farage out here saying that there needs to be a political realignment because the Conservative Party isn't conservative anymore, despite the fact that this has only been official party ideology for the last 50 years, and not for the rest of the time when the Conservative Party has existed.
The position.
Not everyone is making their opinions known so publicly, though, and the most important conversations are probably happening behind closed doors. According to The Times, plots are afoot to force Truss out of her job and replace her with a joint ticket of Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt, who came second and third in the Tory leadership race, respectively. One MP told The Times this: Rishi's people, Penny's people, and the sensible Truss supporters who realise she's a disaster just need to sit down together and work out who the unity candidate is. It's either Rishi as Prime Minister with Penny as his Deputy and Foreign Secretary, or Penny as Prime Minister with Rishi as Chancellor. Seems to be agreed the last thing the Tories need is a full-blown leadership election. But agreement might not seem easy to reach. Sky's Sam Coates posted this screenshot from a Tory WhatsApp group, so you can see an MP in the group, we can't tell which one, say, "Enough emergency repair needed for our party and our country. Step forward, Rishi and Penny, with our support and encouragement in the interests of us all." And then you can see a message from Nadine Dorries. She's responding to Crispin Blunt. And she says, followed by a general election. I love you, Crispin, but if you seriously think we can impose another leader without one, that the media and the people would allow that, you need a lie down. We may as well embrace dictatorship because it's the most undemocratic proposal imaginable. And as I said, these are the only people who could topple Liz Truss. Is there any chance they will? If they were to, what would be the sequence of events you can imagine as sort of being plausible here?
Well, I actually disagree with Nadine Dorries. It was important to say, Michael, say what you like about her, but she did concoct the best attack line against the now Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, when she said that he was the Secretary of State for Health who failed to prepare for the COVID pandemic. She killed his leadership aspirations with that line. People sort of hectoring her on social media, often with great justification, calling her, not nice names. That was very astute political commentary. I thought, well, there you go, Labour. That's the line you can now use against the inhabitant of number 11 Downing Street. I do think that the public would swallow a change in Tory leadership if they said explicitly it's short. This won't be the only winter where that's a problem. There's the next winter too. So we're going to have a caretaker administration for 12, 18 months, explicitly call it that. And then we'll go to a general election as soon as we think that the markets are assuaged and it won't have a negative spillover for millions of hardworking Britons. I think people would swallow that. Personally, I personally think that the Tory vote, which they've lost, they've gone now from 44, 45% in 2019 to 20%. I think all the people that they've lost months ago, or rent, rampant too, or I'm unable to even find a place in London. Maybe young people do want a general election, right? But actually, I think most people whose votes they've lost since 2019 wouldn't want a general election. I think under normal circumstances they would, or for instance during the Brexit impasse, I think people said, have a general election, sort it out. But I think with these conditions, in a cold winter, energy crisis, geopolitical crisis, let's be honest as well, Mike, we don't really talk about it enough. The prospect of a nuclear confrontation in Ukraine, it's really plausible. Really plausible. I find it strange that we take seriously catastrophic climate change, but not the specter of nuclear war. There you go. I can see how they could sell it to the public. And I think actually if they did sell it to the public, I think they'd be polling a darn sight better than they are right now. It's not like they're on 35 in the polls, and if we do, oh my God, I'm going to lose my seat. Right now, 300 odd Tory MPs are losing their seats. If I was them, I'd do it quickly and get the pain over and done with. Like you say, Penny Mordaunt, figurehead at number 10, Rishi Sunak pulling the strings at number 11. Will they do that? I don't know. And look, these people aren't that smart because look where they've ended up multiple times.
I don't know. I've not really heard many of his takes on Ukraine. One of the things I do obviously cover loads of British politics and European politics, but one thing I don't really cover very often is foreign policy. I'm super not up on foreign policy, and I don't like to comment on it because I'm ignorant. I just don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to foreign policy. I'm really not read up or clued up enough on history or the dynamics of any of this. I just don't comment because I don't want to make an idiot of myself. So I never comment on that stuff. So I never looked into Bastani's take on Ukraine. So I'm not going to comment. My views on Ukraine at the moment is mostly shaped by watching Lona Box. So yeah, I can't really make much comment. Also, I'm very tired and very hungry, and it's 11:20, so it's quite late. There's another. If you want to watch the remainder of this, we're at 38 minutes and 54 seconds, about 39 minutes in. If you want to watch the rest about this. Only people who talk about nuclear war, Russian symbols, or lefties with bad takes. I mean, I don't know, like, there's so much dynamic with regards to, like, TLDR did a good video about the prospect of nuclear war and the certain actions that the West and NATO could take to try and defuse the situation, but, it's scary watching your own politicians threaten to press the button as well to try and stop the other person pressing the button, but will that even work with somebody who hates against Putin, who hates his own citizens, and only cares about maintaining his own power and has a complete distaste for human life, right? Can you really kind of placate Putin by threatening him back? I don't even know, right? Like I said, super not up on any of this shit, so I couldn't give you a properly good answer on that. Anyway, I'm going to raid out. Thank you very much for the gifts, Belvoir. The support is always appreciated. Who am I going to raid out to, though? That is indeed the question. Anyone else wants to drop any bits or any subs before you go? Always appreciated. Please subscribe on YouTube, ! YouTube, for any segments that I do upload, which I'll probably be doing tomorrow, trying to spend some time at work uploading those. Who am I raiding into? Who do I raid into? Let's raid into Riverboat Jack, because Riverboat Jack is cool.